of Greater Manchester to play a big part in government. Earlier, the PM said he isn't angry or bitter about speculation around his job following the by-election, but he won't indulge it. Leader of the House of Lords, Baroness Smith, has told Tonight with Andrew Marr that doesn't surprise her.
My experience of Keir is that he's a man of integrity. He set out to change the Labour Party. He's one of very few Labour leaders who have won a general election. And Keir's driven really by a sense of duty. It's not his character to walk away from things.
Yes. Sir Keir also warned Mr Burnham against triggering an immediate leadership challenge. Labour MP Barry Gardiner has told Andrew Marr he doesn't think that would happen straight away anyway.
I imagine that there will have to be a period of settling down. I don't think there'll be, you mentioned things could happen at the end of this week. I don't think so. I think probably the end of next week is much more likely, when there's been a chance to have discussions between Andy and Keir.
A full list of candidates in the Makerfield by-election can be found at lbc.co.uk/candidates. Donald Trump has threatened to resume bombing Iran if their deal to end the war falls through. Speaking at the G7 summit earlier, the US president suggested the agreement could be signed tomorrow. Former US National Security Advisor John Bolton has told Andrew Marr he doesn't think the president can claim the deal as a victory.
I think people will look at the damage done to Iran's military-industrial complex during the war itself by Israel and the United States and see that that's a significant damage done to the regime, but the regime remains in place, and this document is a significant political defeat. There's no doubt about it. There are concessions in here that never should have been made.
A former healthcare worker has been cautioned by the data watchdog after offering to sell the Princess of Wales' private medical records in 2024. Kate received treatment for cancer at the London clinic in the January of that year. LBC's Fraser Knight is following the story.
It had been alleged that at least one worker at the prestigious London clinic had tried to access the Princess of Wales' personal medical details. It's now been confirmed that they had tried to sell them on in return for money.
The Duke and Duchess of Sussex will bring their 2 children to the UK for the first time in almost 4 years next month. Prince Harry is attending an event for next year's Invictus Games in Birmingham. And England fans are starting to pack out pubs, fan zones and the stadium itself in Texas ahead of their opening match at the World Cup. Thomas Tuchel's men take on Croatia in around 2 hours' time. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 14 points at 10,508. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.15. LBC weather turning cloudier for many tonight, though central and eastern areas will stay clear. Showers for northwest Scotland, with rain reaching Northern Ireland later, lows of 10. Cloudy in the north with spells of rain tomorrow morning. Elsewhere mostly dry with warm sunshine in the southeast and the chance of a thundery shower later, highs of 28 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Amelia Cox.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
Evening, everyone. I am in for Ian Dale again tonight and tomorrow and for the whole of next week. It's great to be with you till 10 o'clock tonight. Once again, not only on the radio, but you can also watch this entire programme live on Global Player, the LBC app or the LBC official YouTube channel. After the news at 9 tonight, we're going to talk about the number of people receiving disability benefits. They have topped 4 million, a threshold that means 1 in 10 in the country's workforce is now receiving PIP or other benefits. And you will have heard that some people are getting those benefits for bedwetting, acne, tennis elbow, gout. But do those screaming headlines today give you the full picture, tell you the full story? And what is the solution to a problem that the country cannot afford? We'll hear your views about that after the news at 9. At 8, Cross Question, your chance to ask any question that's been on your mind today. Our panel tonight, John Trickett, Labour MP for Normanton and Hemsworth, Jessica Harrington, political commentator and former Conservative MP, Peter Tatchell, veteran human rights campaigner and activist, and Nimco Ali, social activist and chief executive of the Five Foundation. And this hour,
Andy's a great asset, and yes, I want him to have a big role in government.
The Prime Minister speaking in France today, not waiting for the verdict in Makerfield before indicating that he is going to try and bring Andy Burnham into his own government in the event that Mr Burnham secures the position that he covets at Westminster. Here's Sir Keir talking earlier today on the fringes of the G7 summit in Evian to Sky's Beth Rigby.
When I came into...
Going to call him at the weekend and invite him back into your cabinet?
Well, I'm sure I'll talk to Andy after the weekend. Of course I will. I've spoken to him many times in recent weeks. And when I came into politics in 2015, it was Andy Burnham's team that I joined, and we worked very well together. He's a huge asset. He's been a fantastic mayor in Manchester, and if he comes back into Parliament, he'll be a fantastic asset for our party and for the country.
Now, let me just say before we go on that you can find a complete list of the candidates running in the Makerfield by-election at lbc.co.uk/candidates. And we will play you that, and we will remind you of that later this hour. But that suggestion by Sir Keir Starmer that he might yet be able to strike a deal with Andy Burnham that would keep him, Sir Keir, in number 10 seems like an extraordinary move to take before polls even open tomorrow in Makerfield. In the Commons today, Shadow Energy Secretary Claire Coutinho, standing in for Kemi Badenoch at Prime Minister's Questions, poured scorn on all sorts of rumours flying around about the makeup of a new look cabinet.
They want to make the job-destroying Energy Secretary Chancellor. They want to bring back the former Transport Secretary who resigned for nicking phones. They want to replace him with the former Deputy Prime Minister who resigned for dodging taxes.
And again, this is before we even know the outcome of Makerfield. Imagine what is going to be going on this time on Monday. But let's talk now about Sir Keir's gambit today. The notion that he might offer Andy Burnham a job, who knows what job it would be, and the seemingly remote notion that Mr Burnham might even consider it. Indeed, the Andy Burnham camp has now ruled that out. Is the Prime Minister delusional? He urged the England team today to dare to dream of bringing it home for the first time since 1966. And who among us doesn't like to muse about things that we want to happen, even if they are not likely to occur? But Andy Burnham in Sir Keir's cabinet, is he deluding himself into thinking that he has got a snowball's chance of remaining in number 10? Or do you actually like the idea? Give the King of the North a chance to learn the ropes. Perhaps engage in a negotiated transfer of power over an extended period of time. Is there any way this doesn't end in tears? Call me now at 0345 6060 973. It's the same number for WhatsApp as it is for the phones. You can also text me at 84850. We are going to begin tonight in Makerfield. That is where we find LBC's political editor Natasha Clark this evening. Natasha, it was extraordinary, that intervention by Sir Keir Starmer from France on the eve of the Makerfield by-election. Why do we think he did this today and announced that he wants Andy Burnham to play a big role in his government, rather than wait until seeing the outcome of the by-election and then beginning to engage in a kind of negotiation?
Good evening, Simon. Yes, it's a really interesting gambit from Sir Keir Starmer today. Essentially, I think he's getting drawn into all of this when I think he probably would rather not be. But the last week, I think we have seen a change in tone from the Prime Minister. We have seen a slight shift in tactics. Essentially, we heard last week from him that he admitted that he may not take Labour into the next election. I think really he is starting to see the writing on the wall. Obviously, he keeps saying that he will continue to fight if a leadership challenge does come, but he's not getting into the specifics of what that could look like. Now, lots of people in Westminster are thinking different things about how the Prime Minister is going to play this, but everybody I'm talking to does think that the Prime Minister is going to essentially fight if Andy Burnham does trigger that challenge. Now, I've been speaking to the team Burnham over the last few days, days, and they don't want to be the ones to trigger that leadership election. They want Keir Starmer to, quote, smell the coffee and look at a leadership departure timetable over the weekend. But is that plausible? I don't think so from talking to people in Keir Starmer's team. Obviously, what happens next if that doesn't happen is anyone's guess. And one source I spoke to said they suggest that means going to war with Keir Starmer, potentially cabinet resignations. I think it could be about to get very messy. But just taking a step back, Simon, looking at the area in Bakerfield where I am now, it could decide the fate of Andy Burnham and indeed the Prime Minister. This might be the most consequential by-election in history, where just 70 to 80,000 people could set the direction of tone for the entire country and potentially see a new Prime Minister. Not a single vote has been cast here, yet this area is going to be flooded with activists tomorrow. I'm told that Labour are planning to get 3,000 people here on the doors in Makerfield to try to get out the vote. And Reform say to me also that they are planning to knock on as many doors as possible to get the vote out. So this is a very interesting area. Voted to leave. It's been Labour since 1983 when the seat was created. It sits between Wigan, Manchester and Liverpool. And many people that I've been speaking to here and the last sort of few weeks feel very left behind by those cities, by indeed Westminster politics themselves. And we are seeing a big shift from those Labour voters, people who vote Labour all of their lives, going over to the Reform Party. And ahead of this crucial by-election, we've been speaking to some of those here in this seat. We were working with the pollsters Opinion, who have organised focus groups of some of those Labour to Reform switchers or those who have been undecided for which way they might go to vote. Here is just a flavour of what they had to say.
One of the other big things for me is the immigration. Too many people coming in, and we're trying to squash too many people into areas. It took me 2 years to get my daughter into a dentist, and I live in a village.
Potentially Labour, only because I'm still hopeful that Andy Burnham might come up with his promises one day.
Oh, no, it's going to be Reform. I'm going to be voting for Reform. I mean, I don't think they're going to be any better than Labour or Conservative or Liberal or whoever gets in. But at this moment in time, I think, you only have to walk out your door. If you can't see what's going on, you must be blind. Boarded up shops, graffiti, litter, homelessness, drugs, drink. You can see it.
Labour's okay, but I don't think the Prime Minister's doing enough. Like that other lady said, he promises everything and he doesn't deliver.
And Simon, a few key takeaways from some of that research. One, Labour is no longer the default choice for these voters. They're angry, they're fed up with Westminster, they're fed up with politicians not delivering. This seat may have been Labour since its creation, but that does not guarantee these votes forever. And Reform is the one that's the party benefiting from Labour's difficulties and being seen as the main alternative, what the Tories used to be. Secondly, Burnham, definitely a thing, and I think it's helping Labour here, but it doesn't help them override the feeling that Labour isn't delivering. I'm told Sir Keir Starmer was keen to come here to Makerfield a few weeks ago, but was told he should stay away. And in contrast, Nigel Farage has been up here today supporting their candidate, Robert Kenyon. And third, I think trust in politics, very, very low. Every day we see and we hear about the decline here. It's really affecting people. They are really fearing it. You heard it from that box just there. Crime, litter, policing, a lack of jobs. Simon, I think this by-election, there is going to be all to play for.
Natasha Clark, who's going to be covering every jot and tittle of the Makerfield by-election for LBC over the course of the next 24 hours and beyond, live for us in Makerfield tonight. Also joining me this evening, Stella Santakidou, columnist at Labour List and former Labour advisor who is standing for election to the party's National Executive Committee. Stella Santakidou, thank you very much for being with us on the programme tonight. The Prime Minister's suggestion that Andy Burnham might play a major role in his, Sir Keir Starmer's government, that was an extraordinary move. I mean, it smacked of desperation today, didn't it?
It is quite correct. characteristic of Keir Starmer. If you look through his history, he's someone who came from a humble background, a working class family, and he's basically been winning his entire life. He's been extremely successful in every environment where he found himself, whether that was in school, in university, then in the legal profession as a barrister. He was a top barrister. And then in the Labour Party, of course, he has always found a way to get whatever it is that he wanted. So I would say perhaps he can't really imagine that this would be the case, that he would be losing. Although someone could also say, what if Andy actually does lose tomorrow, which would be catastrophic for the Labour Party, but it would mean that some people would be looking at Keir Starmer, they would say maybe the strategy to just be patient and wait around was the correct one.
What's the more likely outcome here, though? Andy Burnham agreeing to serve in Sir Keir Starmer's government, or Sir Keir Starmer potentially being offered a big job, there's been talk about the Foreign Office, the Foreign Secretary position, in an Andy Burnham government?
All of that is complete gossip, obviously, but the scenarios are as follows. It could be, yes, there is one scenario that Keir Starmer, because he has proven how good he is on the international stage, that maybe Andy will choose to reconcile that way. But I would find that quite strange, given how much bad blood there is between the two of them. It was Keir Starmer who directed his National Executive Committee to block Andy Burnham the first time he tried to run in the Gorton and Denton by-election. The second thing that is being talked about is that perhaps someone like Wes Streeting would be the stalking horse for having a quicker leadership election, so that Andy Burnham doesn't have to be the one who triggers it as soon as he gets elected, because that would be it would be quite difficult, quite shocking for everyone. So if somebody else was to run first, then maybe that would give some breathing room for Andy Burnham. Whatever happens, however, I think that Keir Starmer would be in a very awkward position, because he has time and time again, he has said, if there is a leadership election, I will be running. I will be contesting that leadership election. So what is he going to be doing now?
So was this intervention today, in your view, then more of a threat to Andy Burnham, not to imagine if in 27, 28 hours time he has won the Makerfield by-election, not even to think that the Prime Minister is going to make this a cakewalk in terms of calling a leadership election and agreeing to go?
No, I think this is just another example of the Prime Minister being out of touch with the sense and the feeling across the party, and not being given accurate information, perhaps, or not wanting to believe what is happening on the ground.
And can I ask you also, tomorrow night when the results come in, how important will it be to look at the combined strength of Reform UK and Restore Britain versus whatever majority, if he wins, Andy Burnham may end up recording?
It's a very good question, and it depends on whether you see Makerfield as a constituency which has been turning a Labour MP since the 1900s, the area rather, not the constituency. The constituency is newer, or whether you see it as Reformland, a very difficult place which has been favouring independent candidates for a while. It has been going more right-wing for a while, which Labour had very low chances anyway. So even if Andy Burnham wins by a few points, that is still something to celebrate. Or whether this is something which still deserves a reckoning, to say, wait a minute, your own Prime Minister is only winning by a handful of votes, by a couple of percentage points. I think it's more likely to be the former. It's more likely to be a celebration, no matter how much Labour wins by, unless it's literally just a handful of votes, just because of the shock of the Gorton and Denton by-election result, and also because of the extremely thorough coverage that has been going on in the Makersfield by-election. There have been so many journalists, I was up there myself last week, who have seen how radicalized a lot of the voters there are, and how divided the communities there are, and the fact that you do have a fringe party like Restore, who is hoping to get something like even 10% of the vote or more than that.
Stella Santaquido, exciting hours and probably days, maybe even weeks ahead. Thank you very much indeed for joining us on the programme. Columnist at Labour List, a former Labour advisor standing for election to the party's National Executive Committee. So now it's over to you. What do you make of Sir Keir's gambit today, his offer to Andy Burnham? I've got a big role for you that I'm planning in government. Was that simply bluster aimed at making it clear that he's not going to make it easy if Mr Burnham wins in Makerfield tomorrow night? Or do you think you would welcome the idea of the two of them possibly working together with Sir Keir, essentially in a caretaker position for an extended period of time, allowing some sort of orderly transition to take place? Call me now at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. It's 7:20.
Weekdays from 7 a.m.
Why do you need consultation? Who's going to say no?
Straight to the point.
Let's see. But why let's see? This is what I don't understand.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
Why won't they listen to the most successful living Labour Prime Minister? Arguably the most successful Labour Prime Minister of all time.
Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app. Download it now from your app store.
Feel that? That little buzz of excitement? That's the weekly flutter, with chances to win up to £10,000.
And both of them really don't care. I've been on this planet for 67 years, and I'm absolutely disgusted with politicians, all of them, because all they are doing is literally benefiting themselves. You don't go into politics now to make things change and everything else. It's to actually improve your chances of better pensions, better job prospects once you come out of Parliament. It's a bit like a pro footballer that, who get paid all these massive amounts of money. We're going to see it tonight with England. They're on that pitch, literally, not for their country. They're there actually to benefit themselves moving forward after the World Cup.
Steve, such cynicism. Yeah. I can't believe it. Let me put to you what Sir Keir Starmer would say. You say the country's at death's door. He says we got the fastest growing economy in the G7.
No, we haven't. I'd like to say this to Keir Starmer. How is it that I rent from a council, okay, and my rent is £1,000 a month? The building that I live in is over 50 years old. You can't tell me that council and that building hasn't been paid for at least twice over. Why are rents going up in council properties where people can't afford them? This is the problem. I think actually what it needs people like me, just General Joes, to come into Parliament and say, do you know what, enough's enough. Come and see the reality.
Have you ever considered running, Steve? Have you ever considered it?
You know what? I have, and literally, I'm looking at reform, and I'm looking at, I don't agree with all their policies, I really don't, but that seems to be the only party at the moment that people are resonating with and know that the changes. It's you see people coming across on boats, and I know that they are fleeing, some of them, but I don't see any children. I don't see any mums. If that was the case, yeah, bring them in, because it's women and children. We're trying to help, but these are young men throwing their passports away. The world is at war. and yet we're inviting people in, putting them up in hotels where I, a pensioner now, are struggling and paying massive amounts in rent.
Okay, well, again, the government would say there haven't been small boat crossings for several weeks. Certainly there have been women and children, in some cases, who have died in the Channel as they have tried to get to the UK. But I want to come back to the England football team. Are you really suggesting that the England players are not vaguely thinking about national pride or team spirit? They're only doing it for themselves?
Well, let's put it this way. Go and ask the England team now, because they do get paid for putting on that England shirt. Ask them if they would actually forfeit the money they are paid to represent their country, and they do it out of pride. But they don't. They don't. I can't even look at football now because of the amounts of money that our players are being given and paid, and yet there are people going to food banks. This tells you the whole world, and this country in particular, is so sort of out of sorts. It's incredible.
All right, Steve. Steve in Kingston telling us the country is at death's door. He says he's fed up with both Sir Keir Starmer and Andy Burnham. Let me know what you think about that. Let's go to Blackburn. Trevor is there this evening. Good evening, Trevor.
Hi there.
Simon, Simon.
Simon, I'm sorry, Simon. And you're the greatest journalist I've ever listened to. You're fantastic, and why I forgot your name, I must assume.
Well, that's very nice of you, Trevor. What did you want to say about Sir Keir Starmer?
Simon, Andy Burnham will be a great addition to Keir Starmer's government. The fight with reform will basically be about the National Health Service and Reform's decision to go for private insurance, which is on the cards. Andy Burnham, I believe, has experience as a health secretary, and he will be well placed to fit in that position. The Gavin, I don't know, I can't remember the fellow who was there before he's left. Just to give a balance to the Labour Party and to switch the argument from this ridiculous opposition to violence in the Mideast.
But Trevor, are you suggesting that Andy Burnham, if he wins in Makerfield tomorrow, should take Sir Keir Starmer up on that invitation and go into Keir Starmer's government in a senior position rather than prompting a leadership election and challenging him to become the country's next Prime Minister?
Yes, because at this moment in time, Reform will wipe the floor with Labour. With Andy Burnham giving an extra fillip to both sides of the party. I know Keir Starmer isn't really left-wing, but some of his policies are tending towards a liberal viewpoint. But Andy Burnham has built Manchester. He has experience in getting business into place, and he has experience as a mayor. He has experience in the health service, and the health service will be the battleground. And that will help Labour to gain more of a foothold. It needs an argument. I'm looking at Labour Party now. They're supposed to be a progressive party. The Conservatives are a reactive party. But what I'm seeing with Keir Starmer is reactive politics. The question of Andrew, the Prince, and his late cry that women should be helped and all that, it's a joke. No wonder women say that men are.
OK, well, I think that's taking us slightly off topic, Trevor, but thanks for calling in. I appreciate your thoughts on Andy Burnham and Keir Starmer. We will get to more of your calls and comments on this idea that Sir Keir Starmer has suddenly floated today of Andy Burnham taking a senior position within his, Sir Keir Starmer's, government in a moment. You can join the conversation at 0345 6060 973. You can text at 84850. Coming up after the news headlines, I don't know if you've heard, but there's a by-election on.
Politics for me, and probably a lot of people, is saying it's down south. That's where it is. That's where they make the decisions. It doesn't matter. Now, it's on my doorstep.
A voter there in Ashton in Makerfield speaking with our Northwest reporter Liam Gotting. He's been out with the locals and he'll have a full report on what they have been telling him coming up in just a moment. But now, with the time here on LBC at 7:30, the news headlines come from Amelia Cox.
It's understood Andy Burnham will not take a job in Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet if he returns to Westminster. The Prime Minister earlier said he wanted Labour's candidate in the Makerfield by-election to play a big part in the government. The exiled Crown Prince of Iran has told LBC the regime in Tehran cannot be trusted to honour a deal with the US. Donald Trump has threatened to resume military action if it falls through. The Information Commissioner's Office has cautioned a former healthcare worker for trying to sell the Princess of Wales' medical records. It opened its criminal investigation in March 2024. LBC weather turning cloudier for many tonight, though central and eastern areas will stay clear. Showers for northwest Scotland with rain reaching Northern Ireland later, lows of 10 degrees.
This is LBC.
Feel that? That little buzz of excitement? That's the weekly flutter, with chances to win up to £10,000.
Andy Burnham should reach out and offer Sir Keir Starmer a position within a Burnham administration. Foreign Secretary Sir Keir Starmer, what do you think about that? Call me at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. Robert is in Ayrshire in Scotland tonight. Robert, good evening to you. What would you like to say?
How are you doing? You well?
I'm all right, thanks. Yeah, how are you tonight?
Okay, I'm good. Thanks for asking. The point I was trying to make is just generally about Burnham's credentials as a politician. He has lost two leadership contests already as a candidate. I know now he's wearing glasses and a fleece and he looks a bit more suave now, but he is a failed candidate for years. But yet he wants to challenge his ex-pal, or his still friend, Keir Starmer, to a contest. And I just think the whole thing is ridiculous. He has never been a good candidate under any circumstances.
So Robert... Go ahead.
No, that'd be my point. He has never been a good candidate, apart from the mayoral elections. Put him in front of the membership Labour parties. He's lost twice. He's lost badly to two members. Fourth in the election he came.
So, I might challenge your claim, Robert, that Andy Burnham's been looking particularly... I might challenge your claim that Andy Burnham's been looking particularly suave. I think that even he might concede that when he was filmed going out on his jog, that wasn't necessarily his best moment. But what do you want to happen if he wins this by-election tomorrow? He goes into Parliament. Do you want him to challenge the Prime Minister? Do you want him to join the Prime Minister's government or be a backbencher?
Well, I think that's up to Andy, but I also think he has to show the loyalty to his friend. Keir Starmer was his friend. And we're talking about, we're generally, I don't mean this a bad way, but Andy is a failed Labour candidate. He's lost two Labour elections over separate years, twice to Miliband brothers. He's lost badly to both, and really in its bad circumstances. So he is historically bad candidate. He might wear glasses now and a fleece, but he's still a very bad candidate.
All right, Robert, you're very stuck on the glasses and the fleece, but thanks very much indeed for calling in. That was Robert in Ayrshire. We're going to take more of your calls on the Prime Minister's future and Andy Burnham's future to come. But first, tomorrow, obviously, it's going to be a massive day in UK politics as the people of Makerfield decide who should represent them in Parliament. LBC, as you know, has a big team on the ground. We're going to be bringing you full coverage of the results after the polls close tomorrow night. So where are things heading? LBC's Northwest reporter Liam Gotting has taken to the streets of the constituency to find out.
This is Ashton in Makerfield in Greater Manchester, the current centre of the political universe. But just how much do the people who live here care about the upcoming by-election?
I'm not politically minded, to be honest. It's a bit pointless interviewing me.
Not really bothered either way, whoever gets in.
I'm not sure what's going on. I've no idea who I'm going to vote for yet.
It's a seat that Labour have held since the constituency was created more than 40 years ago. But just a couple of weeks ago, Reform won all 8 of the local council seats that were up for grabs here, and it's become a prime target for Nigel Farage's party. If Andy Burnham wins, he'll almost certainly be carried on the shoulders of Labour backbench MPs into number 10. But if Reform win, it'll send a shockwave into the hearts of the Labour government that they've not felt yet.
It's personal now. It's here. You know, politics for me and probably a lot of people is saying it's down south. That's where it is. That's where they make the decisions. It doesn't matter because whatever they'll do, they'll do. Now, it's on my doorstep. I feel very differently about it.
We've come for a cup of tea here at Hell's Kitchen on the local high street here in Ashton. It's run by Helen Lawson, and she's been telling us a little bit about the local area.
It's a nice little town, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a lovely little area.
Quite a few people are on about voting for, is it Reform?
Yeah.
And then on the other side, Nigel Farage. I mean, I've only heard bits about him. My mum and dad followed him. They were big supporters of him, but I'd say I don't bother with it. But if I was going to vote, I'd vote for Reform.
Why? What is it that would then make you lean that way, do you think?
I don't know.
Is it just hearsay, what you've heard?
Yeah, basically.
Do you think you will vote in the by-election?
I don't know.
Small businesses on high streets like this have struggled for many years. It's always a big talking point when it comes to any by-election. We're going to pop into the local Ashton Pound Shop here to find out what it's like being a business on a high street in 2026.
Makerfield used to be very good. Long time ago, behind there was a market. People getting from all over Wigan and St. Helens and everybody else. Now, since the market is closed, there's not many people around, to be honest.
No. What do you think is the cause of the decline then in this area? What would you put it down to?
To be honest, as I mentioned to you as well, because if the people don't have money and they don't have a job, then this is the main problem.
Well, if there's one thing that this part of Greater Manchester is known for, it's pies. Butter pies, steak pies, and of course, the famous Wigan kebab, which is a meat and potato pie served inside a bread bath. Oh my God.
My name's Peter Kane from Ashton and Makerfield.
Tell us a little bit about being a business in 2026 in Makerfield. What's it like at the minute?
Rising costs are massive. You know, wages are big, running costs, electricity. You know, even my bin bill's £400 a month, which, you know, it's just madness. You know, I've been here 40 years and rising costs, it's never ever been like this.
Obviously, Makerfield's sort of become the centre of the
it's the political universe at the moment, yeah, with what's going on. I don't think people quite understand what is going on, because if he wins this by-election, he's going to become the future Prime Minister, because basically he's got 80% of the vote, 90% of the vote off the Labour Party. So he could be walking into being the Prime Minister.
The future of number 10, the future of the Labour Party, and therefore the future direction of this country could well be decided by the roughly 75,000 people who live in this small part of the world.
I'll tell you what, between Tom Swarbrick and Liam Gotting, it's been a great day in Makerfield to be a purveyor of Wigan pies. 75,000 people in that constituency. They've got the fate of the country in the palm of their hands, and some of them, as LBC's Liam Gotting discovered there, some of them are still undecided. The poll, by the way, that the Butcher referred to there looked at possible runners and riders in a Labour leadership contest a month ago. It will be very interesting to see how those numbers have shifted if and when any contest begins. And just one more reminder, you can find the full list of candidates running in the Makerfield by-election at lbc.co.uk/campaigns. candidates. Now, let's get back to our conversation about the outcome of the Makerfield by-election. We do not know what it's going to be yet, but what will the implications be for the future of Sir Keir Starmer in government if Andy Burnham wins the seat? Hassan is in Westminster and has called us at 0345 6060 973. Evening to you, Hassan.
Yeah, hello. Yes, I think Starmer has to go. I think the message from multiple polls and how he's considered up and down the country, it's very clear. He has been losing local elections. He's been losing parliamentary elections. And if it was not for Burnham as a candidate, they would have definitely lost this election as well. So I think he needs to do something different for a change and behave gracefully and exit with some sort of semblance of dignity intact. I think of the lot of Labour contenders for leadership, I think Burnham would have proved himself, at least on the Makerfield by-election, managing to reverse this slide to reform, as seen by in the last local elections, where all 8 councillors were reformed. And then I think he should be given the chance to actually change direction of the Labour Party. And he should not be continuity Starmer. He should not continue the sort of the nasty immigration policies that Shabana Mahmood has introduced, or continue with the austerity light policies that Rachel Reeves has been peddling. And we need a change of direction, not just a change of leader.
How did you read things today, Hassan, when you learnt that Sir Keir Starmer had made this suggestion that he's got a big role in the government for Andy Burnham if Andy Burnham wins the seat? What did you think that was all about?
I think it's farcical, actually. These are desperate attempts by a politically drowning man. I mean, we all remember how Starmer orchestrated a stitch-up to make sure that Burnham could not stand in the Gorton and Denton by-election. And as a result of Starmer's machinations, Labour not only lost that seat, they probably lost another 100, 200 council seats to the Greens, because that provided such a major uplift. So I think Starmer has always played dirty when it comes to politics. I mean, the way he shafted Corbyn, the way he sidelined Diane Abbott and so many other people from the left of the party, I think it's time for him to move on.
And what would you think about the prospect of Andy Burnham in an effort to suggest that there is some unifying underpinning taking place? What would you think about the idea of Andy Burnham saying to Sir Keir Starmer, if I win the leadership, I'll find a place for you in government?
Look, I mean, I think that would be, I guess, a nice gesture. But I was wondering whether he'll show that gesture to the people on the left of the party who've been treated terribly by Starmer. I mean, I think Corbyn is outside the party. I think Diane Abbott is suspended. I think John McDonnell and so many other people are. And I think Burnham has shown a remarkably sort of soft approach to Josh Simmons, who was the Labour Together guy who had to resign from his cabinet because he was spying on journalists and sicking security forces on them. So I hope if Burnham wants to be generous, then he should be generous to all parts of the Labour Party, not just the right wing, as exemplified by Starmer.
Hassan in Westminster saying that there are lots of scores to settle within the Labour movement. Hassan, thanks very much indeed for calling the programme. You can get in on the conversation between now and 8 o'clock. You can call me at 0345 6060 973 or text 84850. You can also line up your questions for our cross-question panel tonight. They are John Trickett, Labour MP for Normanton and Hemsworth, Jessica Harrington, political commentator and former Conservative MP, Peter Tatchell, the veteran human rights campaigner and activist, and Nimco Ali, social activist and chief executive of the Five Foundation. They'll be here in a quarter of an hour to take all of the questions that you have been mulling over the course of the last 24 hours. You're listening to Simon Marks in for Ian Dale on LBC. It's 7:45.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast on LBC.
The number of people receiving disability benefits has topped 4 million for the first time. In reality, the working population of the United Kingdom comes in broadly at 43 million. So 4 million, that's nearly 10%. 500,000 are anxiety benefits, which includes people who are getting disability benefits for bedwetting, hemorrhoids and constipation. Let's bring into the conversation Maddie Alexander-Grout, who is a disability advocate.
It's not about the individual condition, it's about how it impacts that person. It's not just, oh, you've got anxiety, you've got hemorrhoids, like, let's just give you a benefit.
You're a very decent person, you're very well intentioned, you've got a very big heart, but this is absurd. We don't pay our taxes for this.
Nick Ferrari at breakfast. Back tomorrow morning from 7. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Feel that? That little buzz of excitement? That's the weekly flutter, with chances to win up to £10,000.
Programme last night, you will know that we attempted to get to the bottom of reports that there were plans for a cull of the Dartmoor ponies as a result of what were reportedly the recommendations of Natural England. And you will have heard a lot more about it over the last few hours, not least because of this.
They're going to kill the ponies.
Reform UK's Robert Jenrick jumping all over the story.
The government has come up with a mad plan to slaughter 90% of the wild ponies that graze on Dartmoor. The beautiful ponies that have been there for centuries.
But if you were with us last night, you will know that the government did not really have a mad plan to slaughter little ponies, as Sir Keir Starmer scrambled in France yesterday to insist he would never allow a pony cull to take place. The government distributed a detailed briefing note that explained it was fake news. Recent media coverage has suggested that Natural England has recommended a cull of ponies on Dartmoor, the government said, adding, "This is categorically not true, nor is it true to suggest any scheme has been designed with the aim of achieving this." A spokesman for Natural England went further and said, "The notion that we are advocating a cull is simply untrue. Dartmoor's unique habitats are in a poor state and grazing by ponies is vital for their recovery." So the ponies live to graze another day. But this morning, when I woke up to hear this claim by Mr. Jenrick,
they're going to kill the ponies,
I was actually transported back in time and reminded of something else.
They're eating the dogs, the people that came in. They're eating the cats. They're eating the pets of the people that live there.
Donald Trump at a TV debate against Kamala Harris during the 2024 election, making completely specious claims about Haitian immigrants living in Springfield, Ohio. It was totally untrue, and not a single news organization that descended on Springfield, Ohio, could find any evidence to support the president's claim. Are we really heading in that direction as a country where it's going to be impossible to stipulate to facts? Because once we embrace that reality, all hope is lost, and there is mounting evidence that the public's trust in what they hear from politicians and from reporters is already in decline. Yesterday, a new study by the Reuters Institute found that trust in news has hit a new low as more and more people turn to social media, you guessed it, for their news. In the United States, only 25% of people say they trust news that they hear. Among conservative Americans, that number is down to 15%, despite the extraordinary proliferation of right-wing media in the country. With me now is Dr. Amy Ross-Arguedas, Senior Fellow at the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism and a co-author of the digital news report that was published yesterday. Dr. Arguedas, thank you so much indeed for joining the programme tonight. I don't think that the report that you published actually got sufficient attention yesterday, which is why we wanted to talk about it tonight, because your findings this year, and we should explain this is an annual report that the Reuters Institute puts together tracking trust issues and other aspects relating to the public's consumption of media. I mean, this was really disturbing yesterday.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. This was certainly kind of an unusual year. After 2 or 3 years of relative stability in some of our findings, this year was really distinct. And as you've noted, one of the big changes that we saw was this clear decline in trusted news, which was down to 37% globally, in the UK down 5 percentage points to just 30% who say they trust news in general. And as you've been alluding to, I mean, we think part of this might have to do with kind of the broader instability, anxieties in the world, declining trust in political institutions. But we also think that part of it has to do with changes in how people are informing themselves. And clearly, people spending more time on social media and getting news on there can certainly be playing a role, because we know that people trust news on social media significantly less.
And we should be clear, often they think they're getting news on social media, but they're not actually getting news. They're getting access to a tide, in many cases, of misinformation and disinformation.
Yeah, I mean, they can encounter all kinds of different things, right? It could be news from legitimate sources, from other kinds of sources, from sources they've never heard about. And some people will really struggle to differentiate between some of these sources. That said, one of the encouraging findings that we see in the report is that trust in individual news brands is much higher, and it's more stable. And in the case of the UK, we see that trust in some of the brands is almost twice as high. So potentially people can still trust what they're seeing from these sources, granted that they recognize where it's coming from.
And can you address the collapse in trust, particularly in the United States? I spend most of my time in Washington, D.C. I'm normally LBC's US correspondent. I'm filling in for Ian Dale and other presenters here at LBC at the moment. But I was particularly struck by those numbers in the US, and those numbers among right-wing Americans, even as they are increasingly being catered for by media that is their own ecosystem, an echo chamber of their own views and beliefs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this general trust figure speaks to kind of how people see the broader news ecosystem. And you'll hear a lot of talk about kind of mainstream media not being trustworthy. And so I think that when we see these extremely low trust figures by those on the political right, that's probably what they're thinking about. When we ask them about, brands that they're consuming, that they're choosing to consume, trust tends to be higher. But again, I think overall this is reflecting declining trust in political institutions again. And of course, the U.S. really stands out as a really unique market because it's so extremely polarized when it comes to the news brands that people ultimately, trust and believe.
Can this tide be turned around, or is it too late?
I think that's the big question. Part of this has to do with just the fragmentation of news. And there's certainly a lot of initiatives trying to see if something can be done to try to revert some of these changes. But I think one of the big challenges is just that people are turning to really different types of sources. And oftentimes we see that some of the most popular initiatives to try to restore trust, things around transparency, that they don't seem to be particularly effective among people that already distrust news. So I think it certainly is a challenging endeavor, but potentially if we're able to bring polarization down a bit, that could also potentially help. And it's also important to note that, globally speaking, there still seems to be a pretty strong appetite for impartiality. And, that might also be part of the solution here.
Dr. Arguedas, thanks so much for joining us on the programme tonight, and thanks for the work that you've done on that report. Dr. Amy Ross Arguedas is a senior research fellow at the Reuters Institute for the Study of Journalism and a co-author of the Digital News Report. And I recommend everybody to go and read either the whole report or the summary of it, because I think it is extremely important stuff. Let's go back to the phone lines, continue our conversation about Sir Keir Starmer and the offer that he made today, or conveyed today, in the direction of Andy Burnham. Matt is in Bristol. Good evening, Matt. How are you tonight?
Good evening. Not too bad. Not too bad. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks for coming on. What would you like to say?
I just think it's very typical of Keir Starmer. It seems reasonable, but just generally quite weak. And that's one of the big problems people seem to have with him, that he's just too weak. And that's the only way it comes across to me.
Weak or desperate, Matt?
Yeah, you could go that far. Yeah, it's pretty hard to see why you would offer the olive branch to someone who's coming after you. You just look...
Yeah, and also very hard to see why Andy Burnham would pick that olive branch up and accept it.
Yeah, or even have him in his government. He's just become so repellent to so many people.
So you think this idea that has been mooted, of the possibility that Burnham comes in, there's a leadership challenge, he eventually becomes Prime Minister, and then he reaches out to Sir Keir Starmer and says, would you like to be Foreign Secretary? You think that's fanciful?
Yeah, I think that would go down like, the lead balloon.
And what are you looking for tomorrow night?
For tomorrow night? Well, I hope it goes to Labour. That's what I'm really wanting. I just, I'm really hopeful. I'm sure.
All right, Matt. Well, we will all find out soon enough. Thanks very much indeed for joining us on LBC this evening. Nadia has texted in to say, I agree that Keir looks like a foreign secretary. He looks like the statesman, unlike Andy Burnham, who may be better for the country. None of these people who get to vote tomorrow seem to have any idea what's going on, says Nadia. She must have watched Liam Gotting's piece earlier in the hour, although I think there were lots of people in that piece. Some of them hadn't made their minds up, but quite a few definitely were very engaged and determined to engage in their democratic duty tomorrow. We'll talk more about Sir Keir Starmer, I am sure, in the hours ahead. Coming up, it's time for Cross Question, your chance to pose whatever question's been on your mind today to our esteemed panel. Joining me around the table tonight will be John Trickett, Labour MP for Normanton and Hemsworth, Jessica Harrington, political commentator and former Conservative MP, Peter Tatchell, veteran human rights campaigner and activist, and Nimco Ali, social activist and head of the Five Foundation. Maybe you want to ask about Sir Keir Starmer's future or what to look for in Makerfield. Maybe you've had your eye on the G7 summit, more support for Ukraine there. Maybe you've got questions about the proposed US ceasefire extension with Iran. I know I have. Or maybe Jeremy Clarkson's cancer diagnosis sparked questions about resources for cancer care in the UK. Whatever you've been thinking about on Cross Question, it's your question that matters.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
Leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 8 o'clock. The Prime Minister insists he's not angry or bitter about speculation around his job, but says he's not going to walk away. Sir Keir Starmer has also warned Andy Burnham against triggering an immediate leadership challenge if he returns to Westminster. Labour MP Graham Stringer told LBC the Prime Minister has lost support.
I don't want to see the Prime Minister humiliated. He's failed in his job, that's sad. I'm sure he wanted to succeed. So he needs to work out for himself the best way he can go without total humiliation.
A full list of candidates in the Makerfield by-election can be found at lbc.co.uk/candidates. The exiled Crown Prince of Iran has told LBC the regime in Tehran can't be trusted to honour a deal with the US. Donald Trump's threatened to resume military action if it falls through. A former healthcare worker has been cautioned for trying to sell the Princess of Wales's private medical records. Kate was a patient at the London clinic in 2024. And inflation didn't rise as predicted last month. It remained flat at 2.8%, with interest rates also likely to be held tomorrow. In the city, the FTSE 100 has closed up 14 points at 10,508. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.15. LBC weather, cloudy for many tonight, but clear in central and eastern areas. Rain for northwest Scotland and Northern Ireland later, lows of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
I've looked after my kids since they were born. Now they've got kids. I still want to look after them. I don't want them struggling to make decisions about my money or my health if I can't. So we made a lasting power of attorney. Now, if I can't speak for myself, they'll speak for me. It's a weight off for all of us, isn't it?
Yes, Mum. Lasting power of attorney. Search your voice, your decision.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation. This is Cross Question.
And it's Simon Marks keeping the seat warm for Ian Dale and helming Cross Question all this week and next week here on LBC. We do this every Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m, giving you the chance to lead Britain's conversation by posing the question of your choice. Any subject goes to the panel joining me live in the studio. And this evening our guests are John Trickett, Labour MP for Normanton and Hemsworth, one of the longest-serving figures on Labour's left. He's represented Yorkshire mining communities in Parliament since 1996. Jessica Harrington, political commentator and former Conservative MP for Erewash. She was a government whip, a Tory moderate with interests in legal affairs and equalities. Peter Tatchell, human rights campaigner and one of the UK's best-known activists, also a pioneering figure for LGBT rights. He organised the country's first Pride March all the way back in 1972. And Nimco Ali, a social activist and chief executive of the Five Foundation, the global campaign working to end female genital mutilation. For the next hour, you can ask them anything you like. The news of the day may have sparked questions about what is going to happen next week after Makerfield, or whether the Prime Minister has really buried the hatchet with President Trump at the G7 summit. Perhaps you've got questions about the US deal with Iran. Is it really going to be signed on Friday? Or questions relating to the sad news of Jeremy Clarkson's prostate cancer diagnosis. I know many of you have been thinking today about cancer care in the UK and the resources that are made available for it. Whatever is on your agenda, you can place it on ours tonight. On Cross Question, it is your question that drives the conversation. And don't forget, you can not only listen to us on the radio, but watch us as well on Global Player, the LBC app, or the LBC official YouTube channel.
Call 0345 6060 973. Text 84850. Cross Question. Watch live on both Global Player and the new LBC app. This is LBC.
And welcome to you all. Thanks very much indeed for being here tonight. Our first question comes on text, and it's from Andrew in Fulham, who asks, if Andy Burnham wins in Makerfield tomorrow, should he listen to Sir Keir Starmer and not launch a leadership bid and potentially even join the Prime Minister's cabinet if asked? And if Burnham loses to Reform tomorrow, should Sir Keir Starmer resign, given the huge humiliation that this would clearly represent for Labour? John Trickett.
Well, look, I was in Makerfield the other day, and it's a typical northern seat. I represent one in Yorkshire. It was on the wrong side of the Pennines from my point of view. But they're friendly people. They're very, very gutsy. They know what they think, and they don't hesitate to tell you. My impression was that they will vote for Andy. What was striking was everywhere it said vote Andy, the word Labour didn't appear very much at all, and we didn't see Keir Starmer. So I think that the problem we've got is that Starmer's done a great job in defeating the Tories, but then he's really been very poor as a Prime Minister. Whatever happens, win or lose, and obviously I hope we win, I think that Starmer has to go. And I did say when we got the results from the local elections, it's curtains for Keir.
And if Andy Burnham wins, you then do not think that he should accept a post in Sir Keir's government as Sir Keir offered today?
I think Keir's got 3 or 4 days to make a decision, and then we should go into a leadership election. And it's not something
3 or 4 days.
3 or 4 days, depending on what happens tomorrow. And what I feel is that Labour always stood for justice, fairness, equality, a classless society. He's delivered none of that. He hasn't really operated in the Labour brand. I was the only sitting Labour MP who voted against the cuts to winter fuel for pensioners all that time ago. It got off to a bad start, and it went worse as time went by.
And if Reform wins tomorrow, does Sir Keir have to resign?
Well, he is responsible for the fact that he has led a government which left this great big vacuum to the left as well as to the right. And people are looking for change, for a new kind of society, a rupture with what we have now. At the moment, the only party which is really offering it is Reform. But we have to convince the people that there's a different way to bring about change in our country, and that I think that we should move to the left, also be more green, more environmental too.
Jessica Harrington, 2 questions here wrapped up into one. What happens if Burnham wins? What happens if Reform wins?
OK, so dealing with the first question, events, dear boy. I think Burnham has limited time. If you're going to make your move, and we've seen it so many times, haven't we, in politics, if you hesitate, if you pause, that chance will go. Yeah. This isn't a judgment about whether I think that's right or wrong. I'm just saying I would, in a rare moment, probably of agreeing with John, I think he's got to not take if he wants to go for the leadership, which plainly he does, don't take the job in the Starmer government. This is it. Because cometh the hour, and if you leave it a week or 2 weeks, events, dear boy, we've got Trump and so on, which no doubt we'll get onto tonight. And then the summer will come, then the recess, then the autumn, party conference season. The moment is lost. So having gone through the hurdles that he's already undertaking to even get back into Parliament, he would, in my view, he would be unwise to pause.
And what happens to Keir Starmer if Reform wins tomorrow?
I don't think Reform will win, and I hope they don't, but be that as it may, I don't think it will dilute Starmer's vulnerability any more than, for example, the local election results, because it's actually a by-election result. It's very easy to spin that and explain that in terms of a by-election, their one-offs and so on. I don't think that will be damaging, but Burnham winning is a game changer.
So we're in the ironic position where he could survive a Reform win,
yes, exactly,
but not necessarily a Burnham win. Nimco Ali.
Well, I really do hope that Reform don't win in this by-election, because they don't care about the people of Makerfield, and I don't think they actually care about a lot of the people that they pretend to stand for. I do think, and they should go for the leadership, because that's something that I think a lot of people are looking forward to and quite excited. But what I also hope is that a lot of people that are considering the leadership at the moment, whether it's West Streeton and others, get behind Andy or get behind Keir, whoever's in the leadership. So I think a 2-man race is better than, and I think I say that again, not having a woman in the race is quite interesting. Again, for Labour, can't seem to get a woman on the ticket. Yeah. But I think having a 2-man race would be the best thing for Labour, because I think if it's like a long list, I think it'd be quite bloody for them.
And you think this is going to happen in days, not weeks?
I hope it does happen in days, because the whole point is that the markets and also our kind of confidence in Parliament won't last if it goes on for a while, or whether he calls himself, he gets cold feet essentially.
And on the possibility of a Reform win, what would that do to Keir Starmer?
I don't think it would do anything to Keir Starmer, but it just means the fact that he'd be left with weaker candidates that are going to stand against him, because I think whatever the results are tomorrow, there will be a competition for leadership, and I think Keir Starmer does have that on his cards at the moment, sadly.
Peter Tatchell, your answers to Andrew in Fulham's double-barrelled question.
I'd like to answer from a slightly different perspective. Keir Starmer keeps saying he has a mandate and he's staying. But he doesn't have a mandate. The Labour Party does not have a mandate. It won only 34% of the vote in 2024. Only 20% of eligible electors voted Labour. 66% of people voted against Labour in 2024, yet Labour won 63% of the seats and 100% of the power. That is not democracy. It's not what the Chartists and the suffragettes fought for. So I think that's a big, big issue. The second one is, to me, it isn't about people or personalities, it's about policies. Keir Starmer won the Labour leadership on a manifesto of 10 policies that he pledged to fulfill. He's abandoned every single one of them. And that has left people across the country, including the Labour Party, feeling incredibly disappointed. And the only way Labour is going to fix things is not to fixate on who the leader is, but on remedying people's grievances. People are angry because of the left behind. The people have been left behind. White and black working class communities across this country have been screwed for decades by Labour and Tory governments. Low jobs, low paid jobs, poor housing, a lack of proper adequate education and healthcare. You have to address those issues if you want to defeat reform. And the sad thing is that no one in Labour is really talking about how to put the money in to address those grievances which reform is exploiting and deflecting onto asylum seekers and Muslim people. That's not going to solve any of those problems. Investment in jobs, housing, and education in the left-behind working-class communities, that will undercut reform.
John, I want to get to you in a second, but can I just follow up on that first issue you raised? Andy Burnham has, in the past, expressed support for electoral reform. Are you hopeful that were he to find himself in power, he might actually move forward with that?
I am hopeful, but I'm shocked that he's backtracked on so many policies that he previously stood for. So already in this last 3 weeks, he's turned the tables on lots of things that he said he would previously do. And so, can you really trust him? I mean, I've known Andy. I like him. He's a likable guy. But I feel very nervous about trusting him.
And John Trickett.
Well, by the way, I always believe in the old saying was, put not thy faith in leaders. And I was taught that by my granddad, and I've lived with it all my life. But on the idea that there's nobody in the Labour Party fighting for held-back communities, what do you think I'm doing every day, representing a seat where the average value of output is $25,000 a year compared to £200,000 a year in West Central London. We're arguing for a major shift, a rupture in the way we manage our economy so that we do things very differently. We cannot go on with the levels of regional inequality. And Andy understands that. So I'm not necessarily going to vote for Andy, but at least somebody from the north of England speaking with a northern accent, instead of people always come from North London, will actually be, hopefully in Parliament on Friday morning, able to express what's going on. Joining others of us, we're already
Can I just
there.
say that there's a lot of diversity in North London. I think there is this North London bubble that everybody wants to talk about the Labour Party, but there is some of the most diverse communities in the country. Yeah. And there is real deprivation in the UK, in London as well. So it's not just the north-south divide. So I think we have to understand that London does have some of the poorest communities in this country as well.
Of course. Peter, your response to what John just said?
Well, I'm sure John is a fine MP, but he alone cannot make these changes. It needs government policy to put the money into those left-behind communities, to undercut the grievances that reform is exploiting. And those people deserve a better deal on jobs, wages, education, healthcare, the restoration of high streets. Those are the fundamental issues that people are being exploited by reform. And we haven't had from Andy Burnham or West Streeting or anybody else who's a potential leader their ABC of how they're going to do that.
Jessica Harrington.
Yeah, just on this point about Andy, I happen to have crossed over in Parliament with him for a short time. I know people that work for him. I agree with what Peter said. He's a nice, nice guy and all of that. But to me, the nervousness is around, it's not just a bit of a gap from being a mayor to being Prime Minister. It's just like a yawning chasm in terms of like responsibilities. Being Prime Minister, and I have little knowledge, but it's about the most difficult job that the world can offer. And it requires so many talents, and it's so many limited people that can actually deliver that. And there's a nervousness for me around him being, a successful mayor in the sense of he's popular, he can have all of that, fine. But whether that means that this country is going to be better off with a change at the top in a short space of time and a new Prime Minister, and can he deliver that? There's a nervousness around that. I don't have the perfect answer. I'm just saying that is a topic for discussion.
Okay, and we're going to come back. We're going to keep going with this conversation and this discussion because there's lots of other questions along similar themes coming in that we'll get to. And your question, we will also ask if you call us at 0345 6060 973. You can ask it yourself. If you text it to 84850, I will ask it on your behalf. You're watching Cross Question on LBC. It is 16 minutes past 8.
This is LBC.
Nobody knows Vegas like BetMGM, and we know just how loud it can get. So sometimes it's important to
It's lbc.co.uk/candidates. Our next question comes from Kevin, and it's a follow-up question to the first one about the outcome of Makerfield. Kevin wants to know, does Wes Streeting look like a Prime Minister to you? Nimco Ali.
No, he doesn't. But I was just going to follow on from the conversation that we were having before. We're talking about Andy Streeting as though he is...
Andy Burnham.
Andy Burnham as a president, because the whole point is that he does have the qualities to lead a cabinet, and this is what we need, is we need talented people around him in key points, because they can do those jobs as opposed to being appointed as a loyalist. So I think somebody like Wes Streeting would be great in culture and media. I think he's got other incredible Labour people that would be able to sit around him, and I think with a credible cabinet he can deliver, and that's what's ultimately needed. And I would actually also say, as a millennial and as the kind of squeezed generation, that sandwich between growing older parents, children at a later age, I think Labour needs to move more to the centre than to the left. We're there for benefits, we're there for these things, but ultimately it's about creating jobs by ultimately moving back to the centre and becoming a little bit more Blairites than anything else.
John Trickett picked that point up that Nimco raised, but also, does Wes Streeting look like a Prime Minister to you?
Not to me, but he's made a speech today. Look, let me first of all say, he said two things today, one of which is interesting, which is that he thinks the leadership election should not be about personality. It should be a battle for ideas, and I agree with that. Somebody all my life who's fought for the battle of ideas, hearts and minds, is what this really should be about, because we need to have a debate about what's happened to the country and what's gone wrong. But he made a speech today about something called progressive capitalism. I don't believe in that. I don't think the capitalism we've got is progressive in any way, nor can it be made progressive. We need to move on. We need a rupture with the economic, social and political arrangements which we've had. The people I represent, which were mining communities, 23 former mining villages, are on their knees still all these years after the strike. They need something different, something dramatically different. And so the idea of progressive capitalism, or bringing the profit motive into the NHS, is an anathema to me, and by the way, to many people I represent.
Peter Tatchell, Wes Streeting, Prime Ministerial timber?
Absolutely not. He's made lots of radical noises now, which he never made in the past. It looks like very much a cynical push for progressive left of centre voters within the Labour Party. He's been in charge of privatisation within the NHS, which is a disaster. It's going to cost the NHS and the government much more in the long term. On a whole range of issues, he has been in the Blairite mould. And, Blair may have had some good progressive things like the national minimum wage, devolution and Good Friday Agreement in Northern Ireland. But overall, Blairism was a failure. Mm-hmm. It's set up for the mess we're currently in. Yeah. And I think really Wes Streeting is Blairism Mark II, and I don't want it.
Jessica Harrington, as the Labour Party goes through what could be a bit of an existential debate here, an internal, internecine conflict, what's your view of Wes Streeting? Prime Ministerial?
I'm not sure about prime ministerial. I do think he has charisma. I think he's articulate. I think he has shown some strong leadership skills. But to me, I just think in a week where, I was reading the obituary of sort of Roy Hattersley this week, or, there's leviathans of politics from former generations. And it's very easy, being of an older generation, it's very easy to look back and sort of be nostalgic. But I do worry that at the moment there is a gap in terms of quality of leadership and vision, and I think that that's missing at the moment. And when Tony Blair in the recent article that he wrote, you can pick that apart, but this point about you have to start with policy, whether you agree with him or not, he's sort of, I agree with that. At a time of change, turmoil, I think in most of our adult lifetimes, we've never really felt this level of international geopolitical change and uncertainty. And there is something about having somebody at the core of that who can offer their leadership. And I'm not sure that Wes, who's terribly nice and all the rest of it, but I'm not sure that he is the answer.
But you talk about that generation of Roy Hattersley. And do you not feel that sort of style of leadership and politician is not just missing in the Labour Party, it's missing across the board, isn't it?
Well, I've seen some green shoots, which won't surprise you to say. I think that Kemi Baddock's doing really well. I think she's really grown into the role of leader. But I just think generally, when I look at policy and I look at vision and I think of conviction, it is lacking. And I think perhaps it's an area of agreement tonight that, Starmer, who I know a little bit, but, not terrible. I was, hopeful, not agreed as politics, but I was hopeful that there was going to be a future. But you've got to take people with you because of your vision.
OK, well, I'm glad you've taken us back to the Prime Minister, because one member of our audience is not happy. At least one member of our audience is not happy. Caris has texted in to say this panel is biased against Keir Starmer. It's absolutely disgraceful. I wasn't born yesterday. I know the horrendous inheritance of the 14 years of destruction by the Tories. Also know the right-wing biased press and media and their witch hunt of Keir Starmer from day one. Why won't the panel recognise any of this? Peter Tatchell.
Well, I think we have. We have recognised it. As I said, Keir Starmer sought to become Labour leader on I think it was 10 manifesto pledges to change Britain for the better. And he's ripped up every single one of them. So people don't have trust in him. And that's why people like me just feel that it's time for him to go. I've known Keir Starmer for 40 years. I knew him as a young lawyer in the 1980s. He was a fantastic guy. He was, a radical democratic socialist with a real vision to make Britain better for the poor and the left behinds. He was an early advocate of women's rights, way before many other people, of green environmental protections and so on. And he's just completely changed. And I know people change, but he's changed, in my opinion, for the worse. And it seems the verdict of the country is the same. He has moved not in the right direction. As John said, people want fundamental change. The people who go on those riotous marches, they're deflecting their anger onto immigrants and Muslim people, but they have legitimate grievances. And we should all be saying so. We shouldn't be afraid of being called racist, because we say those white working class people have legitimate grievances, along with black working class people, that they have been ignored and neglected by decades and decades of government. And we need to stand with them and show them that it's not the immigrants and the Muslims who are to blame. Getting rid of them isn't going to change anything. We have to have a fairer, more just society.
John Trickett, are you being too tough on your own Prime Minister?
Well, look, I led the campaign for the opposition when the leadership election took place. I was the chair of Becky Long-Bailey's campaign, and he won it. I don't think we fought the best campaign we ever could, but we put our arguments, we made a case of the party, and we lost. So I took the view that he's got to be given an opportunity to show, what he's made of. I voted against some of his ideas, but generally speaking, I thought he had the right to say that, you want me some loyalty. But once we're in office, the first thing to do is to take money off pensioners and then move straight on then to saying we're going to start taking money off the disabled and people on benefits. That was contrary to everything which the Labour Party stood for. And then to fail to reindustrialise those deindustrial communities like the miners, steel workers, shipbuilders, the textile workers, it just went, there's nothing there. We're on our knees, and why on earth we haven't seen a change? So I've been calling for a kind of Marshall Plan for the North and other parts of the country, but he hasn't responded. He's too busy projecting himself on a national scale. So when I'm walking around my area, they say, well, he's gone again. Where is he now? He's off projecting his power in the rest of the world. Well, we do need to do that, but actually the first duty of a Prime Minister is actually to rebuild and to heal the wounds which have been left by, really 3 or 4 decades of neoliberalism.
And on the doorstep in Makerfield, when you went up there campaigning for Andy Burnham, how toxic did you find the Prime Minister?
I think the fact that he wasn't there, that he wasn't any posters, that we were saying, vote Andy, tells you everything that you need to know. I think wherever I go, look, I got on a train the other day, there was only one seat, I sit on it, this man says, hello, John, I know who you are. And he immediately started on about Starmer, and we don't like him. We voted in Reform as a protest, but basically we don't like him, he's got to go. When you ask why, it boils down to fairness, telling the truth, saying what you mean and meaning what you say. Very Yorkshire kind of values is how we talk in the North, and I believe it's the right way to talk as well, by the way.
And it's interesting, though, Nim Kowali, because we did an hour on this before Cross Question began, and there were a number of people that texted into the programme saying they want Keir Starmer to remain in post.
Well, I don't know who those people are, but I can just say that he shot himself in the foot with 3 things. First thing was to not get rid of the child benefit cap. True. Having worked with the last Conservative government, I think that's one of the most grossest things that we ever did was to put that cap in and then put a rape clause in. Not taking that away was terrible. The pensioners, cutting the pensioners' winter fuel was unnecessary. Then decimating and cutting the international foreign aid funded and lying and saying that he was going to give it to defence. Again, that was terrible. And then personally, he spent the last 2 years gaslighting us, telling us that he's the most caring about violence against women and girls, as though Theresa May or Boris Johnson and others haven't done anything. So to me, he's just a man that has actually just said things but hasn't actually done anything. So I'm not sure who wants him to stay, but ultimately he's just let his own side down.
Well, Jessica Harrington, some of the people who want Keir Starmer to stay want him to stay because they're tired of the constant upheaval.
Yeah, and it's a legitimate point, actually. I think this, the merry-go-round of change of Prime Minister it is relevant. It is a consideration. It is a reason to pause and not to embark on the leadership campaign that Andy Burnham probably will be doing in about 36 hours. Because at a time when the country is facing, I would say for many decades, unprecedented pressures, geopolitical changes, etc., you have to weigh up actually what is the advantage overall, what is the net advantage to changing the person at the top. Why do we need an unknown quantity in terms of a prime minister? And I think it's more of a balance than might initially seem. It's fine for people to say, well, Keir's not delivered. Hang on a minute, we are mid-term. We're facing all these pressures internationally as well as on a domestic level. It's not, I don't think the answer is necessarily to roll the dice.
But all right. He has, I think, undergone, is it 8 or 10 U-turns? Or more. I mean, that doesn't show leadership. It shows a big mistake and then capitulation. And he's never really owned up to it and said sorry. He's just changed the policy and hope we'll forget. I mean, it's a pretty damning indictment of Keir Starmer that a right-winger like Wes Streeting can be talking about a wealth tax and the Prime Minister won't even entertain the idea. I mean, there are, over 150 billionaires in this country? They could easily afford to pay a little bit more. A 2% wealth tax on the billionaires, they'd lose perhaps at the most 20 or 30 million. They'd make that up in the next year because their profits are going and shares are going up all the time. Why can't we have a government that says it's patriotic for millionaires to put their money to support this country, to fund the NHS, to fund social care? And look, there are millionaires who are saying, we want to pay more, we're prepared to pay more, because they recognise it is an honour and privilege to live in this country. And as Spider-Man might have said, with great wealth comes great responsibility.
All right, it's a lively panel tonight, and you can still put your questions to them. You can text us at 84850 or call 0345 6060 973. More from John Trickett, Jessica Harrington, Peter Tatchell and Nimco Ali to come all the way between now and 9 o'clock. But now, with the time at 28 minutes to 9, the news headlines come from Daryl Jackson.
It's understood Andy Burnham will not take a job in Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet if he returns to Westminster. The Prime Minister earlier said he wanted Labour's candidate in the Makerfield by-election to play a big part in the government. Donald Trump says he will take further military action if a deal between the US and Iran to end the war in the Middle East falls through. The US president says their agreement isn't final. And a former healthcare worker has been cautioned for trying to sell the Princess of Wales's medical records. It follows abdominal surgery Kate received at the London clinic in January 2024. LBC weather cloudy for many tonight, but clear for central and eastern areas. Rain for northwest Scotland and Northern Ireland later, lows of 10 degrees.
This is LBC.
The FIFA World Cup is here. We've been waiting for it, dreaming of it. Absolutely nothing could make it any better. Except
tonight, suggesting that some pretty significant cuts are coming to specific programmes on Radio 4 and changes to some BBC TV news programmes as well. So, Nimco Ali, will the BBC still exist in 10 years?
I hope so. I think we are incredibly spoiled because of the fact that the BBC has always been there. We don't necessarily know what we have. I think one of the key things is that we should call the BBC licence fee a tax and just say that it's a tax that everybody has to pay. But ultimately, I do think it'll be there in 10 years' time. I will give a personal example. So I was born in Somaliland, and I was in Somaliland at the time of the war in the 1980s. And it was BBC World Service that we trusted. If you talk to certain Jewish communities and certain people that lived through the Second World War, it was the BBC that got them through. So ultimately, the BBC has been the voice of truth, the voice that you could depend on for almost, 100 years. So I think we need to consider, as much as we love the NHS, which actually I think needs more criticism, I think the BBC is a credit to the British.
But you would go beyond the optional licence fee. You would say, call it a tax, charge every family household in the country, but require them to pay that tax.
It is a tax, and I think that's the problem is the fact that because we call it a fee and we're so nice about it and we're so British about the whole thing that
everything. You can or you cannot pay the license
technically,
fee.
It's a law. It's a legal thing that you should buy if you do have a TV. But I think just call it a tax and just charge everybody for it. I keep saying this. We're from a generation that we consistently. I'm paying for so many things that I never actually see the benefits of. Whether it's my council tax, I don't have any children, I don't drive, I don't do any of these things, but I'm happy to pay because I want to live in a society where everybody's taken care of. The BBC is fundamental globally. It's also one of the only things that you can put a child in front of for half an hour and actually know that they're going to learn something, that they're not going to be sold crazy stuff that you have to ban. So the BBC is ultimately one of the greatest things that's come out of this country, and we need to do better things in order to protect that. So I think call it a tax. Everybody has to pay and everybody does get a benefit from it.
Jessica Harrington, I mean, it's got in some fashion to adapt to the modern era.
It has. But I would say, I mean, Nimco's comments have made me sort of moderate probably what I was going to contribute. So whilst I definitely think the BBC will be here in 10 years, I think Nimco's reminded us, and it's not just nostalgia, it's the value that the BBC has added over generations. However, we do live in a changing world. I think that if they're making changes, that's a good thing. I felt for a long time that there were too many managers, there were too many, white middle class Oxbridge guys that just got jobs for the boys running the show, and so on and so on. I wasn't sure they really reflected what somebody who has to pay the licence fee actually wants to see. I've had concerns about their news and so on and so on. But having said that, if there is a way to navigate for them to maintain their integrity and their role in British public life, but equally they've got to be relevant, they've got to not be biased in their news coverage, and they've got to present an offering that people will think is fair for them to pay for, then they should. So I think they'll be around, but I think they're finally waking up to the fact that they need to be more relevant and they need to make changes.
Yeah, but what does that mean, the relevance of the whole thing? And I think it's a structural problem. Okay, fine, you don't want as many managers, but the existence of the BBC is really ultimately what kind of matters, and the BBC needs to exist. And this idea of bias, that the left thinks they're biased, the right thinks they're biased, means the fact that they're doing a job. So what does relevance actually mean? It means the fact that it's there, the BBC is so wide from its Discovery channels onto its news channels, onto its children's channels. It's there for everybody. So I think ultimately we get a joy out of knocking the BBC, but as soon as it's gone and as soon as it's weakened, I think we're going to be really, really sorry.
And John Trickett, that's the real question, isn't it? The BBC will exist in some form in 10 years' time. But in what form? Can it still be doing all things to all men, or has it got to zero in on a much more concentrated mission statement?
All men and women.
And women.
But, I mean, here's the first thing to say is you lose confidence of people who are struggling to get by, to pay the food, if you're paying huge amounts of money to presenters, and some of them are earning outrageous amounts of money. So they are vulnerable. And people say to me, I'm not watching bloody BC, it cost me a fortune, look how much they're paying them. So that is just a reaction of working class people in my area. But here's the funny thing about this, it sounds like the cuts are all to news. It didn't sound like
this is the first draft.
You've reported.
There are going to be scores and scores of cuts, but they're starting with this unveiling of news cuts next week.
Absenting yourself from news, and by the way, I don't have a lot of confidence in the news at the moment from the BBC. We've got to change that. And leaving the news then to GB News, which is a commercial operation with a particularly quite right-wing slant, is a big mistake of the BBC. We can't allow them to simply walk away from news production.
Well, and they're not walking away from news production.
It sounded like there were major cuts.
They're talking about a rationalisation.
It sounded like major cuts. But I think the real problem is that it's too narrow a band. We need a broad band. They don't really have voices from the north, not really. And the people I represent, and I always think my job's to give voice to the voiceless. But why shouldn't the BBC be bringing more, not just white people of a certain class?
I mean, the whole...
Well, it's in Salford, but does it get Salford people on the TV talking about what their experience of life is, or Makerfield either, or black people in the north of London, or whatever it might be? I think it's too narrow, so you need to broaden it out. When people watch the BBC, they need to recognise the vocabulary, the rhythms of speech, even the way that people dress, as that's one of us, and I can listen to them, and it's got some authenticity. So the BBC needs to change, but walking away, even if it's only in part, while leaving the GB News continuing to receive millions of pounds, is a big mistake for the health of our democracy.
Peter Tatchell.
The BBC is not perfect, but its loss would be a big blow to everyone in this country. You may not recognise it, but it would be a big blow. It is a trusted news source in Britain and around the world. It doesn't always get it right, and it deserves some criticism here and there. But overall, it is a fantastic British institution. It's a flagship for our country. And people struggling against tyranny in all parts of the world, they listen to the BBC to hear the truth that's being censored by their dictatorial regimes. We must never, ever give up that, because that soft power is where Britain really has effective push, and it's spearheaded by the BBC. The other point I'd make is so many of the people trying to do down the BBC have an ulterior motive. They want to get rid of the BBC to enable the field clearer for private corporations to step into that space. And it's all about money. It's about profits. It's about greed. And we have to say no to that.
All right. Well, we are going to say yes to your question. If you'd like to put it to our panel this evening, you can call us at 0345 6060 973 or text 84850. When we come back, we are going to talk about Donald Trump, Iran, and that ceasefire extension agreement. The time now here on Cross Question on LBC, 17 minutes to 9.
LBC.
At ulesprosperity.com, you buy the car and we pay you up to £600 per month in rental income. For conditions,
and Reconstruction Fund for Iran to the tune of at least $300 billion if the Iranians get through the 60-day negotiations that will kick off as soon as this ceasefire extension agreement is signed and do all the things that the Americans want them to do. Now, earlier on LBC, the Iranian political activist and former Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi spoke with my colleague Andrew Marr, and he expressed his concern about any deal which could end up handing money over to the Iranian regime.
They're courageous, they're willing to sacrifice, and this is, at the end of the day, how history shapes itself. Eventually, they'll go down. They will fall on their own sword. And hopefully we'll have much more support by countries that until now have been hesitant to take a strong stance vis-a-vis the regime. They've been timid. They've been blackmailed by hostage-taking by the regime or now threatening the Strait of Hormuz. If you reward a regime that blackmails you by promising them economic relief, it's adding insult to injury. And if you were to give that money, it will not trickle down to the people, by the way.
They'll keep it. They'll keep it for themselves.
Reza Pahlavi there telling Andrew Marr that the Iranian people now have to adjust to a new reality, given that it is increasingly clear that this ceasefire agreement absolutely puts paid to the concept of regime change taking place in Iran. Peter Tatchell, is Trump's Iran peace plan worth the paper it's written on?
Donald Trump is the biggest con man in recent modern history. I mean, he is full of lies. He's been promising an end to the war for the last 2 months. He said it'll come this week, next week, promising a deal. Nothing materializes. I don't believe this deal is worth the paper it's written on. And just look at the cost to the world of what Trump has done. It hasn't produced regime change. It hasn't released political prisoners. It hasn't done anything further than what Obama did in terms of suppressing Iran's nuclear capabilities. It has been a war costing £1.5 billion a day. It has clogged up the Strait of Hormuz, affecting all the world's energy supplies, pushing up prices. It has been a war of chaos and destruction with not a single redeeming result.
Can I ask you particularly about how you think the news of this deal is going to be received by people in Iran, including members of Iran's LGBT community?
Well, I have contacts of people in Iran, and I work with them supporting their struggle for freedom. And they are all extremely skeptical. And they feel very betrayed by Trump. Months ago, he promised that if the regime cracked down and killed protesters, he would intervene. Now, I'm not an interventionist. I wouldn't have supported intervention, but he did promise that and then didn't deliver. So people are very, very, very cynical. And it's not just about LGBT, it's about all Iranians. The scale of massacres and torture that's going on right now, the executions that are happening right now of often young people, 18, 19, 20, for participating in a peaceful protest on fake charges that they killed or attacked a policeman. It's all fake charges. And the world there's not much we can do, but we certainly should not be doing deals with the regime. And to give them $200 or $300 billion, as Trump is seen to be proposing, is absolutely a monstrous betrayal.
Nimco Ali, if it's not worth the paper that it's written on, there is still the possibility that over the course of the next 60 days, this all falls apart again.
I think it will fall apart, and ultimately, it's not really a deal if it's going to just give Iran's going to keep its nuclear weapons. It's going to keep oppressing people. Lebanon is still going to be stuck between Hezbollah and Iran. So there's a lot of problems. But I also kind of think that if America is thinking of paying reparation, they should start thinking about paying it to their own and about the transatlantic slavery rather than giving it to the tyrants of Iran.
Yeah, I mean, the president is saying this is not going to be American money. This is going to be the creation of a reconstruction fund, and anybody can invest in it. The Gulf countries can invest in it if they want to.
Yeah, but why
you can invest in it if you want to.
Well, I'm not going to invest in it, but why would they want to do that? And I think one of the really dangerous things that that Trump has done is that America for years has had this kind of policing role, and everybody was like, if you are out of line, then America's going to attack, America's going to do something. So America's done something now in Iran and actually kind of technically lost the war. So what he's also done is weakened the global role that America has in terms of its peacekeeping.
It's the biggest American defeat since Vietnam.
True.
Yeah.
Jessica Harrington, the Prime Minister, among the other leaders of the G7 in France over the last couple of days, has congratulated the American president on securing this agreement. Should he be congratulated on something that may not be worth the paper that it's written on?
It's premature. I mean, I think the scepticism around the panel tonight is something that I would share. I think it's with sort of a sense of trepidation that we all hear about this potential peace deal, whatever you want to call it. But until it actually materialises, and even then the content of it is a worry. It's difficult given the history with Trump, the unpredictability, the erratic nature of the personality as to what is actually going on. And I what is of concern is not only the issues highlighted by others on the panel tonight, but also, for me, one gets the sense that the Strait of Hormuz, for example, he'd never even heard of it before he'd embarked upon this action. And whilst we all might share a wish, or we may or may not, but for a regime change, for the appalling atrocities under that regime, and Peter's articulated some of them, and I absolutely share the worries and the concerns there. The mismatch between Trump wanting to achieve something and then not really thinking through what that process will require and what it would result in. It seems to be now, while we have the grandstanding and I've come up with a deal, I hope there is a deal, although I share the points about money being handed over in the way it's being suggested. But I'm afraid I'm not confident in that. So we'll see.
John Trickett, one of your Labour colleagues, Alex Ballinger, was in this studio on Cross Question 2 nights ago, saying that the decision to go to war on Iran was a catastrophic mistake by the American president. That's not a phrase the Prime Minister has ever used, but I'm assuming it's a phrase that you would agree with.
I think it was a catastrophic mistake. The first thing they did, by the way, appalling, drop a weapon on a school, kill 300 children.
And he was asked about that today. He was asked about that by an American reporter at the press conference today. President Trump, and asked if anyone in his cabinet was going to pay any price for that. And his answer was, terrible things happen in war.
Yeah, that is utterly heartbreaking. You think of those families and those children, it's appalling. And the first reaction was, oh, well, it was Iranians who did the bombing themselves. But there were no war aims, there was no legality, and he just thought that what he did in Venezuela, which was wrong as well, take the president out and the whole thing will just change and to be transformed. He misunderstood entirely the nature of Iran. I agree it's an appalling place, but the Pentagon knew well that they would then close the Strait of Hormuz and the implications it would have in the world. And what's happening now is people right around the world, including in London and everywhere in our country, are now paying the price in higher petrol, food, fertilizers and other costs as well. We're all paying the price of that. My final point is this. You said he's going to say they're going to reparations 300 billion, I think you said. I think the war done trillions of damage to
2 trillion.
2 trillion, 300 billion. And then he said, we won't be paying the 300 billion, meaning the Americans. So what's he got in his mind? I mean, the man is seriously mentally unstable, and that's understating what I think's wrong with him. To have him as a president is worrying. And then for a prime minister to feel that it's the job of the British prime minister to go over there and kind of, I won't use the language we would use in Yorkshire, but to be
Please don't.
No. But it just felt wrong, and I think the British people thought this is not who we are as a nation when that happened, quite frankly.
Okay, let's go to our next...
With an envelope in your pocket from the King.
Right.
I mean, extraordinary.
Let's go to our next question of the night. It comes on the telephone from David, who is in Bayswater this evening. David, good evening. What would you like to ask?
Panel, yeah. So is the term left behind communities a bit of a misnomer, considering that everyone in Britain has free healthcare and education, and many people in other countries don't have this, but they still make something of their lives? I just feel we're a bit spoilt in this country.
We're spoilt in this country, Nimco Ali, and is the phrase left behind communities now a bit meaningless?
No, it's not, because when I say that as a black woman who has been immensely privileged to be able to go to good schools and good education, as a child refugee, I lived in working class communities, and I can tell you that I've had the things that I've had in life because of the free healthcare and the free education that I have. But most people in this country are not getting equality of the education and equality access of the healthcare. At the moment, I'm dealing with a very close family relative who is dealing with cancer, and the services that she's getting in Bristol is completely different to what she would be getting in London. So there are left behind communities. There are people that we need to think about, and sadly, many of those are not necessarily the ones that we think of people of colour, but they're white working class communities. So I think there are left behind communities, and that's in education and healthcare, and also in aspirational opportunities as well.
Jessica Harrington, I mean, David's call essentially is saying we all get free healthcare, we have access to free education. Is it not meaningless now to talk about communities that are left behind?
It's not that it's not meaningless. It's all about context. I think in terms of globally, are we all generally in a privileged position? Of course we are. But for me, the greatest pressure at the minute is on the younger generation. I really think that young people for Britain, for the first time since post-war, have faced uncertainties and challenges that none of us could have anticipated when we were growing up. There were things that we took for granted that are now not even going to happen in terms of even a remote chance of getting on the housing ladder or having a job in a way that was difficult but possible for earlier generations. So that's where I think the real inequality lies.
Peter Tatchell, I think I already know your answer to this question.
Well, look, just to give one example, not everyone does have access to free healthcare. Mm-hmm. Dentistry is healthcare, yet hundreds of thousands of these people in this country do not have access to an NHS dentist. They're doing DIY dentistry at home because they don't have that access. It's absolutely scandalous that our Labour government has not invested the money to fix that, because dentistry and dental health care is a fundamental human right. I don't want to make this about me, but I'll just give you an example. Earlier this year, I had an injury, a very bad injury to my leg. I was in excruciating pain for 1.5 months. I could hardly walk. I had to wait almost 6 months to get an MRI. Now, I'm lucky, And I live actually within 2 miles of King's, Guy's and St Thomas's Hospital, 3 of the top hospitals in this country. Just imagine what people who aren't so lucky are enduring. And just imagine what they're enduring if they've got life-threatening illnesses. You know, our healthcare system is failing millions of people. Look at the waiting lists, over 7 million. That is not an acceptable thing in a democratic and humanitarian society.
John Trickett, persuade David in Bayswater that the phrase left behind communities is not
I invite him
meaningless.
to come up and go through some of the mining villages that I represent, but I've never used the phrase left behind. I say that those communities were held back. Black communities are held back, so are gay communities and working class communities across the country. They're held back by a system which is designed basically to hold people back. To say left behind, it's like a passive process that happened to you rather than deliberately engineered by a system which simply isn't working for so many millions of people. And the final point is this: why are there millions of people in work, in poverty in Britain? It's because of low pay. They haven't been left behind, they've been held back.
All right. Well, the hour has flown by and we have reached the point of the evening where I get to ask the panel our fun question of the night, which comes on text from Edward, who tells us that the Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni has told world leaders, I did not know this, at the G7, that she's given up smoking but craves coffee. What is a vice, if you have one, that you just can't give up? I should have given you the opportunity to think about this beforehand. What is a vice that you just can't give up?
Talking too much.
Jessica Harrington?
Joint first, chocolate, and spending time with our lovely dog Moodles.
That doesn't sound like a vice. Is that a vice?
No, probably not. Your fair criticism.
Nimco Ali.
I think it's not a vice, but it's just something that I just can't seem to stop, is arguing with idiots. I think it's one of those things that I seem to care too much about things that are fundamental.
We won't take it personally.
I'm glad actually I didn't argue with you guys. I thought the question was going to be, what have you given up? What vice have you given up? I was going to say,
and have you given what vice have you given up?
As a heterosexual woman, I've given up men. I've given up dating, so that's been quite good for my mental health.
There's a whole hour in that. Peter Tatchell.
Far too much dark bitter chocolate.
The good stuff.
But I am trying to cut down, but, you know.
All right. Well, they've revealed something to all of us. Thank you all so much for being here. It's been a fantastic hour. And thank you for all of your questions, whether you've called in or sent them on text. My panel tonight, John Trickett, Labour MP for Normanton and Hemsworth, Jessica Harrington, political commentator and former Conservative MP, Peter Tatchell, veteran human rights campaigner and activist, and Nimco Ali, social activist and chief executive of the Five Foundation. I hope we will do this all again. Into our final hour together tonight, and we want to put the focus on today's news that the number of people on disability benefits has risen above 4 million for the first time. That's 1 in 10 members of the workforce receiving PIP or other disability benefits from the government. You will have seen the screaming headlines, concerns that people are getting handouts for bedwetting or acne, gout or tennis elbow, scroungers, wastrels, ripping us all off. But the actual picture is much more nuanced and complicated than that. We are going to explore how the benefits work, who gets them, and whether away from all the headlines there's a mature conversation to have about how Britain can cut the numbers while also making sure that those with disabilities get the assistance they need to stay in work.
On your radio, on the LBC app, and
Play LBC.
leading Britain's conversation. This is LBC.
From Global's newsroom at 9 o'clock, it's understood Andy Burnham would turn down a job in Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet if he returns to Westminster. The Prime Minister has said he wants the Mayor of Greater Manchester to play a big part in government. LBC's political editor Natasha Clark has explained what could happen if he wins.
Andy Burnham is now wargaming for what happens next in the hours and the days to come. Now, if he does win, won't be an MP until Monday, until he is sworn in to Parliament on Monday. So you can't challenge the Prime Minister until then. So we are up for a weekend, essentially, of feverish speculation.
A full list of candidates in the Makerfield by-election can be found at lbc.co.uk/candidates. The exiled Crown Prince of Iran has told LBC the regime in Tehran can't be trusted to honour a deal with the US. Reza Pahlavi, who has been living in exile in the US for 46 years, accused Iran of using the deal to regroup, restock and rearm themselves before going back into battle. Donald Trump says an agreement with Iran will be signed over the next 48 hours, but human rights campaigner Peter Tatchell told LBC it's probably not worth the paper it's written on.
Donald Trump is the biggest con man in recent modern history. I mean, he is full of lies. He's been promising an end to the war for the last 2 months. He said it'll come this week, next week, promising a deal. Nothing materialises.
The data watchdog has cautioned a former healthcare worker for trying to sell the Princess of Wales's medical records. It follows Kate's abdominal surgery at the London clinic in January 2024. A man arrested this week, 9 years after a jogger shoved a woman headfirst into the path of an oncoming bus, has been released on bail. The bus driver swerved and managed to steer around the woman on London's Putney Bridge. The Prince of Wales has wished England luck ahead of their World Cup opener this evening. Thomas Tuchel's men take on Croatia. These fans have been speaking to LBC in Bristol.
I think we've got the worst opening game of any team. We're the only person with a group that has another team that is a big team.
We've got a lot of young players with a lot of ability, but when it comes down to it, when it's like on the main stage, when it means something, I don't know whether they're going to be able to perform, to be fair.
In the city, the FTSE 100's closed up 14 points at 10,508. The pound buys $1.33 and €1.15. LBC weather, cloudy for many tonight, but clear for central and eastern areas. Rain for northwest Scotland and Northern Ireland later. Lows of 10 degrees. From Global's newsroom for LBC, I'm Daryl Jackson.
This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with Simon Marks.
And I'm in for Ian Dale again tonight and next week. He will be back in this chair on June the 29th. You can put a date in your diary. In our final hour together this evening, given that there's nothing else going on in the world at the moment, we want to look at disability welfare benefits. You will have seen the screaming headlines this morning. More than 4 million people are now receiving them, 7% up on a year ago. It means the Department of Works and Pensions is likely to pay out £32 billion on disability benefits for adults and pensioners this year alone. For the first time, that's more than 1 in 10 of the workforce getting PIP or other government benefits. And as the tabloids were eager to report this morning, some of them appear to be getting those payouts for bedwetting, acne, gout, tennis elbow, even constipation. Now, PIP, as you probably know, is not means tested. Many people think it should be. And the general sense you may have got from the news coverage today is that scroungers and wastrels are ripping the taxpayer off by claiming they've got constipation or spots, so they need £194.60 per week from the public purse. But is that really an accurate reflection of the way things are? I mean, look, any government handout is always open to abuse. And there's no doubt that among those 4 million people claiming disability benefits, there are bound to be some who have managed to game the system. But this hour, I want to hear from you if you're on PIP or other benefits like universal credit, and you went through the process of getting them. What was it like? How rigorous was it really? And if you're alarmed by the numbers, and lots of people are, and that's perfectly legitimate, how do you propose those numbers can be reduced? There is, after all, a systemic contradiction between PIP, which is work neutral. You get it whether you're in work or not, and universal credit, which of course can pay you more for proving that you are unable to work or unable to prepare for work. The government's efforts to reform all of that, of course, collapsed last year. So what should we do? Because we've now got half as many people on disability benefits in the UK as they've got in the United States, a country with nearly 5 times our population. The UK has 4 million million people on disability benefits. In the United States, that number is about twice that level, around 8 million people, but that is in a country with 5 times the population of these islands. Call me on 0345 6060 973, same number for WhatsApp that it is for the phones. You can text 84850. I want to know what you think we should be doing about all of this, because the numbers are unsustainable. The numbers, the money that the Treasury is going to have to come up with in order to continue paying this ever-enlarging bill for disability benefits, never mind all the other welfare payments. And I'm sure at some point during the course of the next hour, someone's going to end up using the phrase triple lock, so I might as well be the first person to use it. These numbers are economically unsustainable. But how do we find a way of reducing them while also seeking to be the kind of society that makes sure that people who need assistance and need benefits truly get them? Again, you can call me at 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. We're going to begin our conversation tonight by talking to Dr. Shani Danda, an accessibility consultant and disability activist. Dr. Danda, thank you very much indeed for coming on the programme tonight. Why don't we just start by asking you to explain to our audience what an accessibility consultant does? I mean, are you someone who connects people eligible for PIP and universal credit payments with those government benefits that are available? Good evening to you.
Good evening. So no, my job is to work with businesses and brands and help them on everything to do with accessibility and meeting the needs of their disabled customers, employees, and their overall business strategy. I myself am a disabled person, and I am an ambassador for many different disability charities, as well as a disability rights advocate. So this is a topic that I have a lot of lived experience on and, speak to a lot of other disabled people about too.
And when you read these headlines and you hear these stories about people getting PIP for bedwetting or acne or tennis elbow or gout, that's not actually the only reason they're getting PIP, is it?
No, it's not. And I'm really glad that you brought that up. Unfortunately, what we're seeing with those sort of headlines is just clickbait. So in order to be able to get PIP, you need to score points by demonstrating how your physical or mental health condition limits your ability to do sort of what we would consider as, your average everyday tasks, rather than focusing on like a medical diagnosis itself. So for example, you're scored on things like your ability to wash yourself, to get yourself out of bed, to dress, to cook yourself a meal. And quite often people will have more than one condition. There's absolutely no way you would ever be able to get PIP if you just had acne. That has to be listed with other health conditions. I've got 8 separate medical health conditions. So it's just to give you a bit of an understanding that usually when you have one, you develop others as well, as a result of your body trying to manage with different symptoms and health conditions. So for anyone that is confused about that, it is unfortunately clickbait.
Well, I mean, I think it's really important to understand that. And can you explain about the sort of the work neutral nature of PIP versus the elements of universal credit that might encourage some people to go for higher levels of universal credit by saying they're unable to work and they're unable even to prepare for work? Because there's a tension in all of that, isn't there?
There is, and I think there's a big misunderstanding because I think a lot of people think PIP is something to do with employment, but PIP actually exists because the government recognises how expensive it is to experience disability. So on average, disabled people face unavoidable extra costs of over £1,000 a month. This is on average. So for some people, it might be less. For some people, it might be more.
And just explain what kind of costs you're talking about.
So to give you an example, if somebody uses an electric wheelchair, they're going to have to charge that very regularly. So therefore, they're going to have a higher energy bill.
Which is a real issue, especially now.
Yeah, and it's not something you can do less of or just stop. So these are everyday things. And you know, if that's not your reality and if that's not your life, you take those things for granted. So I have a short stature. I'm the height of a 4-year-old, and there's no shops that sell clothes for my body. I can't wear kids' clothes because, you know, I'm a woman. I have curves. Children's clothes are not made, you know, for my body type. So I have to pay to get everything tailored. That's one of my big extra costs. Another one is to get to work. I can't use the tube because only a quarter of our tube stations are step-free. So my only option to get to work is to go by taxi, which is the most expensive option. So you can quickly see how, you know, this all adds up and there's no real other alternative. So that's why PIP exists, to offset those costs. But again, I want to make it clear that the government isn't giving thousands of pounds in PIP a month. The max is a few £100s. And then if somebody does have a Motability car, a big component of that will go towards the car. So they won't even get all the cash. They exchange the cash in order to lease the car.
But you would accept, I'm assuming, Dr. Danda, that as with any government benefit, you know, there are some people out there that presumably are finding a way of gaming the system. The system, any system, is gameable.
So the official fraud rate from the Department for Work and Pensions is actually less than 1% for PIP. And it's, you know, very low. But if you didn't know that, you've never heard of that, and you just read the headlines or the news, I'm not surprised why people think there is a high fraud rate. But when you are assessed, you've got to give a lot of medical evidence. They contact your, your GP, your doctors, the other healthcare professionals. You've got to give so much evidence. And another thing is that in the UK, we have 16.8 million disabled people. So if, you know, not all of those people are claiming PIP, and not all of them will be eligible to either. But this, to be really honest, this isn't a surprise, because as a society, 83% of disabled people were not born with their health condition. We as a society, not just in the UK, around the world, we acquire, you know, our health conditions and impairments, and we're living longer as a society. We're developing chronic health conditions at a much younger age, and there's much more awareness now of different conditions and diagnoses, and just more general awareness of what might be available. So I think for some people it might sound like it's really unsustainable, but I just would like to add a bit of balance to this and say, you know, it that shouldn't be somebody's first thought to think, oh, we're all being fraudulent or trying to be.
And just tell us again that fraud rate. What was that fraud rate?
Yeah, it's less than 1%.
And let me put to you what one of our listeners has texted in, Duncan in Aberdeen. He says 2 words, means test. Means test all benefits and have continuous follow-ups. People should not be signing on and forgotten about. Also, there should not be any way of being able to self-certify your own benefits. What would be wrong with a means test with regard to PIP?
So what research tells us is a lot of disabled people that claim PIP and that are in work, because there are a lot of disabled people that are in work and do claim PIP, is that they use their PIP in order to stay in work. So I just gave you the example of how I spend thousands of pounds a year on taxis. That is something that PIP would go towards. So that's the purpose of PIP. So The other thing we need to take into consideration here is how hard it is as a disabled person to not only get in work, but stay in work. We are twice as likely to be unemployed, and we have to apply for 60% more jobs just to secure an interview than a non-disabled person. And if we are in work, the disability pay gap is so wide, we are paid over £4,000 less a year. But then if you look into it more, the gap's wider if you're a woman, if you're from a global majority background. So actually, on the surface, it might sound like a good idea to say means test this particular benefit, but it's actually going to put more people in poverty, and it's going to prevent more people from actually being in work. And again, just to add here, half of everyone in poverty in the UK is a disabled person or they're a carer.
Dr. Dhanda, thank you so much for kicking our conversation off tonight. I'm enormously grateful to you. That's Dr. Shani Dhanda, an accessibility consultant and disability activist. Now it's over to you. You can call me at 0345 6060 973. Same number for the phones as it is for WhatsApp. You can text 84850. What is your view of how in a mature, nuanced and responsible way we can bring some of these numbers down, make it more affordable, less of a challenge to the Treasury and to the taxpayer, but still make sure that people who need these benefits are getting them? You're listening to Simon Marks on LBC. It's 19 minutes past 9.
This is LBC.
And here she goes. The night shift employee has found herself space in the canteen. A quick touch to the pocket and she whips out her phone. But what's this?
So with this, I know like there's a new program coming out. Basically, the old program, if the healthcare professional who does assessment over the phone, if they make a decision, the decision maker has to go by the recommendation of that health professional. Where I was previously, we as a decision maker have to balance everything, have to look at the evidence, medical evidence, and so on. And I appreciate your previous caller said that we need to, there is a lot of medical evidence, we can contact the GP, we can contact the physiotherapist and so on. However, in that form, if the customer does not give us consent to do that, we can't contact anyone. We have to take that customer's word for this illness that they say they have.
So is that where you would argue that there is an opening to game the system?
Yes, definitely. There is that one. But also, since COVID, everything's turned into over the phone. So, and I've witnessed myself when we have real doubt about somebody and asking somebody to come into the office, they kick off, we don't want to come in. But then why are we still having those over the phone, assessments? Why aren't we bringing everybody face to face? Because obviously we do have enough decision makers. I know for a fact we do have enough healthcare professionals. Why can't we bring people in for a face to face assessment, like you go into your GP or something when you really need help? But that's where, for me personally, I remember cases that, absolutely shocking. And I personally, they were the recommendation from the health care professional were enhanced, which is the highest rate possible. And just as I had a duty of care to contact this customer, because this customer was saying he's not engaging, he's not leaving the home, he can't do online shopping, he can't do his online banking. So it was just a duty of care of how is this customer surviving. So I called out to the blue, and the customer was in the shop, at the till, and I could hear everything. So it was like he could walk. He was so angry. It was a Saturday, I still remember. He was so angry that, somebody from DWP has called him on a Saturday. I could hear his footstep, and he was swearing. So he could communicate. He could go out and do his shopping. It just small things like that.
So, Koki, can I put to you what the Department of Works and Pension figures show? These are the official government figures relating to 2024. Yep. The DWP, I'm reading off the website, the DWP considers that the rate of fraud in relation to personal independence payment, PIP, is so small that it is assessed at 0% in the 2024 Fraud and Error in the Benefits System Annual Report. Now, by contrast, fraud rates for universal credit were 10.9%, pension credit 3.9%, housing benefit 3.9%, but PIP was registered at 0%. You're suggesting on the front lines of this, that's not the case.
But I don't believe that's the case, like hand on heart, simply because as a decision maker, you get trained to make a decision, you get trained to, that decision might not be what, the claimant wants, but you have to make the right decision and taking everything into account. But we never got trained of how to report fraud. But now, like I'm not going to mention it, but I'm still with DWP, and I am on UC at the moment, I manage. There is a way we train the work coaches how to report fraud. Everybody has the time. If we suspect fraud, I will give my team leader and my team members at least half an hour to report that. However, after the report, it takes months for it to be picked up. It doesn't get picked up immediately.
OK, so that's very interesting. Koki, I'm enormously grateful to you for calling in. Koki from Islington, who used to be someone who adjudicated claims for PIP and who is suggesting there that one area where money absolutely could be saved would be not only by creating an environment in which fraud reporting is encouraged and can take place by those decision makers, but that the impact of reporting fraud can occur much faster. So Koki, someone who used to adjudicate PIP decisions, we're now going to go to Beckenham. Bianca is on the phone from there. And Bianca, I believe that you are a PIP recipient, so you can tell us what your experience was of applying for PIP and proving that you were eligible for it.
Yes. Hi, Simon.
Hi there.
Yes, I was severely ill mentally, and that makes the difficulty with PIP. So it was a mental illness. I was pretty much 1 year in psychiatry in 2006, and the hospital applied for me for PIP, which was granted, and that I have been receiving since then. However, every 2 to 3 years, I need to reapply. And I am aghast at the people who are saying, oh, it's so easy to get PIP, because it is an absolute killer.
So tell us what you have to go through in order to get it, for those of us who don't know.
It is. It used to be a 36-page application form. It's now, I think, slimmed down to something like 22 pages. You have to explain for every single part of your mobility, what you can do, what you can't do, getting dressed, as the consultant said already. I don't want to repeat this. Can you prepare food, etc., etc. And then the same questions come for personal care, which is far more related to mental health, not mobility. Are you able to find your way home? Can you drive? Are you safe on the road? Are you safe with knives, etc., etc.? It then needs, you need to hand in your prescription, your repeat prescription, to prove that what you're claiming you are taking is indeed what you're taking. A report from your GP. A report from your psychiatrist, and in my case, I also add a report from my therapist. And I had the experience about 6 years ago when I was really, really ill, because added to my mental health, not just severe chronic depression and anxiety disorder, but also bipolar. I visited the assessment center, which in itself is so... It just puts the fear of God in me a bit like now.
So just to be clear, though, Bianca, I mean, again, from your experience, the notion that anybody is getting PIP for acne or gout, they're not getting PIP for acne or gout. They're getting PIP because among the list of ailments and disabilities that they have, acne and gout may have been boxes that they ticked. Is that right?
I suppose so, even though I find it extremely bizarre that somebody would get PIP for acne unless it obviously affects their mental health.
Right. So exactly, there has to be a connection. You don't get it for one particular disease or even one particular disability. There has to be that overall assessment. Bianca, I'm really grateful to you for phoning in. Thank you very much for sharing those experiences. We have got lots of calls and texts coming in on this. One listener, Nadia, says, where does this rubbish come from? She's talking about the notion that everybody receiving these benefits is scrounger or a wastrel. Not everybody, but substantial numbers of them are. She says it's so hard to claim PIP. It often gets rejected, goes to appeal where there are medical staff to be overturned. My neighbour in their early 60s had 3 heart attacks and was rejected. However, she says there seem to be a lot of parents claiming benefits for their children with mental health issues that I suppose are hard to dispute. You can call me with your experiences of this, whether you're a healthcare professional, whether you are a recipient for PIP, maybe you're someone who was denied your claim for PIP, or perhaps you're someone out there who doesn't want to use your real name but does want to tell us that you are getting some of these disability payments out of the public purse, even though perhaps you probably shouldn't be. You can call me at 0345 6060973. You can text 84850 at 29 minutes to 10. The news headlines come from Daryl Jackson.
It's understood Andy Burnham will not take a job in Sir Keir Starmer's cabinet if he returns to Westminster. The Prime Minister earlier said he wanted Labour's candidate in the Makerfield by-election to play a big part in the government. The exiled Crown Prince of Iran has told LBC the regime in Tehran cannot be trusted to honour a deal with the US. Donald Trump has threatened to resume military action if it falls through. And the Information Commissioner's Office has cautioned a former healthcare worker for trying to sell the Princess of Wales's medical records. It opened its criminal investigation in March 2024. LBC weather cloudy for many tonight, but clear for central and eastern areas. Rain for northwest Scotland and Northern Ireland later. Lows of 10 degrees.
This is LBC.
Close your eyes. Take a deep breath. And come on in to Classic FM Calm, LBC's soothing sister station. Find peace in the music with Classic FM Calm. Listen on Global Player or ask your smart speaker to play Classic FM Calm.
Lotto from the National Lottery now gives you 2 chances to win with every ticket. So it could be you, and it could be you. You
can reduce those numbers, because we clearly can't continue to afford shelling out over £30 billion a year on disability benefits for very long at a time of tremendous pressure on the Treasury. But how do we find a way of reducing those numbers while making sure that the people who really need those benefits continue to get them? More of your calls and texts on that to come. But first, as we reported last night on the programme, there are growing warnings from military leaders that soon the UK will not be able to mount basic military operations without more money. The Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, has said she will not raise taxes to fund military modernisation. Instead, she's told all of her cabinet colleagues that the cash will have to come out of their individual departmental budgets. Earlier this week, Richard Knighton, the UK's Chief of the Defence Staff, warned that the level of day-to-day military activity is now coming under pressure because there is already insufficient cash to fund those military activities. One idea that has been floated is to cut the available funding for army reservists. It's a soft target. It's been discussed before because you don't need them until you need them. But there are many voices out there warning it's a bad idea, and one of them joins me now. It's Rob Clark, research fellow at the Washington-based Yorktown Institute, although he's in London tonight. He also served in the British Army in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he himself is an Army reservist. Rob Clark, thank you very much for being with LBC this evening. The Army Reserve funding, it is a soft target, isn't it?
Good evening, Simon. Yes and no. In one sense, it's an easy, escapable political solution. The army itself, or the military more broadly, is quite an easy political decision to make cuts because defence is notoriously, it's not a vote winner. I think that's starting to change now, and particularly with the reserves, people are more aware now of the role that the reserves have in the military. Even in Iraq and Afghanistan, many reservists fought alongside their regular colleagues, such as myself, and many of them, when they left Iraq and Afghanistan, became reserves. So the reserves have a huge footprint in the community more broadly. And I think, like I say, people are becoming more aware of this. So this is probably likely to happen, but I think it will be deeply politically unpopular at the same time. Explain,
at a time of tremendous tension internationally, why the reserves are so important.
So I'll give you a really good example. Finland's on the border with Russia. Obviously, it has about an 830-mile border. That's an enormous territory to defend against Russia. And obviously, the Finns are increasingly twitchy about it. They have long-term history with Russia. They have a standing army of about 25,000. To put that into context, the British Army, the regular force, have an operational capability of around 50,000, those able to deploy, so twice that of Finland. The British Army, though, by contrast, only have around 21,000 reservists, many of whom are non-deployable, long-term non-attenders, medically downgraded. The Finns have around 750,000, 750,000 reserves that they can call up in a very similar model to Israel. So the ability to generate a reserve force at pace and scale, the likes of which we've not seen since, either World War I or World War II, is increasingly important to the security of the UK and NATO. And just finally on that, we can all see, most wars are started by regular forces, but they're always won in the end, or lost, but they finish with the reserve forces coming in and either mobilisation or conscription of a civilian effort.
And in terms of current funding levels for the reserves, are they satisfactory? Are we already in a sort of a parlous condition?
Yeah, no, we actually are. And this has been under the radar now for around at least a year or two. But in the last 6 months in particular, I think many elements within the MOD, in fact, I know for a fact, many elements in the MOD are already hedging their bets that the reserves are going to be, primed for trimming around the sides in the coming months ahead. So in the last 6 months, for example, many reserve units, many brigades, their reserve forces haven't been getting paid for things like fitness training. It's mandated Army Reserve policy to do fitness 3 times a week. They're now not getting paid for it. And there's also instances where people come in, soldiers come in to do training during the week. They're not getting paid for that either because the budgets are getting squeezed so tightly already in anticipation of the cuts likely to come. So I think this will be even more pronounced. And ultimately, this is just eroding 2 things. One, the British Army's ability to fight, and also the reservists' morale. Many vote with their feet. I know many people who have left the reserves or simply don't turn in for the last year, 6 months, couple of months, because they're not getting paid and morale is at an all-time low.
You know, we've had several conversations on LBC over the course of the last couple of weeks, obviously, about military expenditure, much of it sort of ignited by the sudden resignation of John Healey as Defence Secretary last week. And every time I helm one of these conversations, listeners text in and say, oh, military figures, they always want more money. When have they ever come on the radio and said we need less money? Kevin, one of our listeners, has just texted in to say the UK military budget is the 7th largest in the world. How much more money do we need to spend on our military? What's your answer to those criticisms?
Well, my answer to people like Kevin is actually incredibly simple. I mean, for a start, we don't have the 2nd largest military budget in the world. We have the 5th.
7th, I think Kevin suggested.
Yeah, Kevin's wrong. But in terms of like why the military always seem to want more money, I'll put it into context. The social welfare system in the UK, we roughly spend around 5 times the amount on welfare than we do on warfare. So the welfare budget is around £340 billion. The MOD's budget is around 65 billion. So that just puts it into context. Secondly, in terms of the amount of bang for buck we get for the UK's defence, one of the biggest contributors to the defence budget, around anywhere between a fifth and a quarter of the annual budget, is around our nuclear enterprise, our nuclear estate, the so-called continuous at-sea deterrence. Now, the reason why that's important beyond the UK's waters is we are the only European NATO force, France is the other, but they don't do this, where our nuclear deterrent is safeguarded, umbrellaed, if you like, for the rest of European NATO. France don't do that. So in effect, we're subsidising, you could arguably say, outside of Washington, the entire European NATO continent with our nuclear defence. Nobody else does that apart from Washington, and people are increasingly viewing them as an unreliable security partner. Not myself, but many people are. So in terms of bang for buck, we get a lot, and we don't even spend that much, comparatively speaking, to other departments in the UK, particularly the welfare budget, like I say.
Do you think Rachel Reeves is making a mistake by saying she's not going to increase taxes to fund additional expenditure?
Made a series of cataclysmic mistakes. I don't think necessarily she's making a mistake by saying she won't raise taxes. Interestingly, my understanding of that current conversation is she's not ruling it out for this year's upcoming budget, and I think that'll be really interesting to see Treasury, short-sighted, wrangling to try and fix that with different mechanisms for increasing taxes. But what I would say is there's a whole host of areas where the government can make savings. For example, net zero costs the UK between £9 and £15 billion a year. The welfare budget, like I've just said, is £340 billion a year. All the MOD are asking for, or people like the previous Defence Secretary John Healey, all they're asking for is roughly around about an extra 14 billion, which, like I say, pales. It's pennies on the pound when we're talking about welfare, when we're talking about transport, education, things like this. So I think context is key when we talk about defence spending.
Rob, I'm very grateful to you for coming on the programme tonight. Thanks so much for being with us. That's Rob Clark, Research Fellow at the Washington-based Yorktown Institute, also served in the British Army in Iraq and Afghanistan, and is himself an Army reservist. And it does tie in with the bigger conversation we're having about disability payments. £32 billion this year. The Department of Works and Pensions is going to pay out on disability benefits for adults and pensioners over 2026 alone. Let's go back to the phone lines. Martha is in Dunbar in East Lothian. Good evening, Martha.
Hi, Simon. Nice to talk to you.
Thanks for calling in. What would you like to contribute to this conversation about PIP and universal credit?
Well, I'm I'm disabled and I'm on PIP and universal credit, and I have been for about a year and a half now. But the actual process of getting both of them was extremely difficult, especially when you take into consideration, just me personally, I have quite severe mental health problems, and filling in a form that is so huge is very difficult. And also, it's not necessarily tailored to mental health. I know one of your previous callers mentioned some of the sections are, but it's so difficult because it's not a straight line. Whereas, and I don't want to use anybody else's experiences, but from my experience, like saying, can you cook a meal for yourself, for instance? Yes, but I can't do that every day. So depending on how I'm feeling and what stage I'm at, these are all, it's like you said, it's talking about the nuance of it. It's incredibly complex.
And are you saying, Martha, that the form itself doesn't allow you in some of those instances to be nuanced in your answers?
Yeah, absolutely.
One of those sort of questionnaires where you look at the question and then you look at the available answers and you say, well, none of those quite cover my case.
Yeah, so I had to get help from some external kind of agencies like in Dunbar that helped me with the form and fill it in. And, they would sit and talk to me and say, well, what do you think about this? And then, they'd reflect the answers based on that. And that was hugely helpful. But when it came to universal credit, that was more intense because that was a nurse I had to speak to on the phone for well over an hour and go through my entire history. So it wasn't like I just said, I'm depressed and whatever else I have. There is a huge mechanism there that you have to navigate to get through.
Would you means test it?
Again, I feel bad talking about anybody's experience.
No, I mean from your own. You can only speak for your own personal viewpoint and your own personal experience. But do you think PIP should be means tested, which would save the public purse something?
Yeah, I think that's possibly a route to go. I heard, interestingly, I heard Diana talking on the radio at LBC this weekend, I think.
Yeah.
And she was very clear. It was the first time I heard a politician be clear about it. And she was asking, I can't remember who the presenter was.
It was Lewis Goodall. She was on with Lewis, I think.
Yeah. She was essentially saying, well, where are you going to cut? Where are you going to cut? How are you going to cut? And she was very clear about that because there doesn't seem to be an answer to that. There seems to be, yes, we need to cut it, but who do we cut it from? Do they cut it from me? Do they cut it from somebody else? And I, like many others, are reliant on benefits at the minute. I wouldn't be able to survive without them. So that's what I'd like to, hear more about is how are these cuts going to be made.
So you would be open to means testing, but you'd need to be persuaded that it was not going to take a scythe to people's ability to get it if they really need it.
Yeah, I would, and the PIP does help me because it means I can get taxis to places like another caller said, and it reduces the stress on me and makes life more. I have 2 children, so I have to manage those as well, and it just takes a bit of the bite off it, if you see what I mean, in terms of,
Absolutely, I do. Martha, I'm really grateful to you for calling the programme tonight. That was Martha in Dunbar. There are lots of you standing by to join this conversation about disability benefits, and particularly about the way in which it was presented in some of the tabloid newspapers today. This notion that people are getting government handouts because they've got acne or gout or tennis elbow. Let me know your views on all of this. 0345 6060 973. You can text 84850. The time here on LBC and across the country is 13 minutes to 10.
Coming up at 10 on LBC, Ben Kentish.
With Labour on the cusp of booting Keir Starmer out of office, is yet another Prime Minister really what we need right now? Plus, England's German manager gets stick for not singing our national anthem. Is that fair?
Ben Kentish at 10. Listen on our free Global Player app or the LBC app.
Enter destination.
Car giant.
Car giant. No longer in business.
No way.
Way. Go to Big Motoring World, London.
So that is tomorrow night at 10 p.m. here on LBC with Lewis Goodall and a team joining him from Makerfield and, of course, here in Westminster to bring you the very latest as those results of that all-important historic by-election come in. That'll be Lewis Goodall with our election night special here on LBC from 10 o'clock tomorrow night. Let's go back to our conversations about disability benefits. And another Lewis is on the telephone this evening from Leytonstone. Good evening to you, Lewis.
Hello there, Simon. How you doing?
I'm very well, thanks. How are you doing tonight?
I'm doing good, thank you very much. I get PIP as well, and I work full time, and I kind of want to talk about my journey through PIP, if that's all right.
Please do.
So I had to appeal twice. It went to court before I got approved. During my first two decisions, I was considered a perfect person. I have dyslexia, I have autism, I have ADHD, I have dyspraxia, I have epilepsy, and with my epilepsy, I have anxiety and depression with that because I'm naturally susceptible. But they still would turn around and say, you're perfectly fine. Now, I think what would actually save the public money is if it wasn't going through an applied assessment thing. But when you get diagnosed with your thing and you get a severity score with whatever that may be, then that gives points towards a PIP system. So you don't have to go through this application. When you're diagnosed and you meet this trigger for it affects your daily living or your mobility, then you just get the money, you get a letter through the door, and it just asks you, please enter your bank details, we'll send you the money. It takes it out of people just making the decision and puts it in medical professional hands.
I mean, we find ourselves in an extraordinary position, Lewis, because the day began with all of these stories in the newspapers, essentially saying that people were able to get PIP and other benefits for cases of acne or constipation, and it's far too easy, and we can't possibly have these numbers rising above 4 million people receiving these various disability benefits now. That's more than 1 in 10 of the workforce. And then at the other end of the spectrum, we've got your story, which is someone who had all sorts of reasons why they should have been granted access to PIP, and you faced an uphill battle to get it.
Yeah, and I literally just broke the benchmark in court as well with this uphill battle.
Explain what you mean by that.
So the minimum score you need, because I only get the basic daily living component. I don't get the enhanced, I don't get mobility or anything like that. I only get the basic, and you need 8 points to get that. I got 8 points awarded to me by the court to say I deserve the daily living, and that's it. That's literally what I managed to get. Now, part of the problem as well is, frankly, the forms don't really make that much sense to me. I was confused along the entire thing, what I needed submitted. The instructions weren't clear to me, which is ironically part of it. Can you follow simple instructions, complex instructions, and things like that? I wasn't quite sure how to answer these questions, so part of the problem as to why I wasn't getting awarded it was because I didn't understand. But the reason I didn't understand was because of my disabilities. And only through getting to the court and being able to explain to them, I allowed them to talk to my GP. I allowed them to talk to my doctor. I signed all that to say, yeah, do it. They'll probably explain it better.
But there is a flip side to that experience, Lewis, which is to say there clearly are all sorts of procedures here put in place to protect the public purse, even as I think we can all accept that in any government benefit, there are going to be people who can figure out how to game the system one way or another.
I would believe that there are plenty of ways to gain a lot of systems, but evidence shows to me, especially with the less than 1% fraud rate, especially considering my own anecdotal evidence, especially I have a friend, for example, who had PIP many years before me, and during the same time I applied, he suddenly was a perfect human being. Nothing's changed for him, but suddenly he was a perfect human being. We started having these troubles, and part of me does think, is there political pressure on assessors that they can only award so much? I don't know that for sure, but that's my experience, and it was grueling of an experience to go through.
Well, Lewis, I'm enormously grateful to you for calling in and sharing that experience with us tonight. Hugely valuable, I think, to hear stories from the front line of what it is like to try and get these disability benefits, even while we can stipulate to the fact that there are inevitably going to be some people out there who are getting the cash that don't really deserve the cash, that don't have an obvious right to the cash. Let's stay with the phone lines and go to Beverly, who is in Shrewsbury this evening. Beverly, good evening to you.
Oh, hello. I used to be a community psychiatric nursing sister, and then I got Lyme's disease. And I'm disabled now. I can't. I have carers 4 times a day, and what I find distressing is that the carers, they really, really work hard, and 2 of them walk to their clients, but they're all from Africa. Why can't we get people working from our own country? And there must be people that are I will say it, are claiming benefits, and they would be better off going to work with depression and anxiety and getting people to support them while they're at work, rather than being off sick and then being off sick for long periods, and then they won't ever be able to get into work.
Well, Beverly, I think it's a really important part of the conversation, and I'm very grateful to you for raising it, because one of the key issues here that the government and its opponents have to consider and work out is, if you're going to reform the welfare system, as the Prime Minister says, in order to create a situation in which people are encouraged to get back into work, what exactly does the architecture of that system look like? Beverly, thanks very much for calling in. I want to squeeze one more call in. It's been a very busy hour. Kelvin is in Argyll in Scotland. Good evening, Kelvin.
Good evening. The reason why I'm ringing is basically you mentioned the words means testing and PIP in the same sentence.
In the sense that some are arguing that PIP should be means tested.
No, because PIP serves one purpose and one purpose only, and that is to fill the gap in expenses. So it pays for all the extra things that you need when you're disabled. So how can you means test additional expense?
Well, you could argue that there are people out there that have sufficient affluence to be able to cover the costs of that additional expense without the PIP payment.
Well, there is that possibility, but then I would imagine they wouldn't put themselves through the system for £114.
Have you done that, Kelvin?
Yes,
You've put yourself through the system?
Well, it's not for me, it was for my wife.
Right.
My wife was diagnosed with MS in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently she'd had it since she was 21, so several years earlier. And she carried on working, and she had lapsed in remitting, and they were absolutely hideous relapses. They literally, in one day she woke up, she was blind. And she stayed that way for 3 weeks. So she couldn't go to work. She lost her job, but she soldiered on, and she went into part-time work she was a PA and secretary, and she lost that in the end because attacks would coincide at the same time. So she basically gave up. And we then applied for PIP to help us with our expenses, etc. And that wasn't for about another 6 or 7 years. And in that process, she's just got generally worse and worse and worse. And the impact of my career was that it destroyed my career in the mid-90s.
I'm sorry, Kelvin.
I went from basically a reasonably good earner to scrabbling around, just finding bits of work to fit it in. So at the end of the day, I've probably saved this country and the taxpayer, which I'm also a taxpayer, but saved the taxpayer hundreds of thousands of pounds.
Kelvin, thank you very much indeed for sharing your experience with us as well tonight. I think all of these different testaments explain how complicated a subject this is and why a nuanced approach, I think, is absolutely vital. I am out of time this evening. Tomorrow night, we've got a special cross-question panel, big international panel. Ben Judah, former advisor to David Lammy, the chief executive of the UN Association UK, Jane Kinnenmont, Lionel Barber, the former editor of the Financial Times, Times, and Sam Kiley, the World Affairs editor of The Independent. That is it for me this evening. I will be back tomorrow night at 7. Coming up at 1 here on LBC, it's Richard Spur. But right now, here's Ben Kentish.
Thank you, Simon. Hello there. Good evening. Welcome to Late Nights with Ben Kentish here on LBC. Tonight,
and
good, wasn't it?
Asset.
It's a good show.
And,
very good.
Yes, I wanted to have a big role in government.
Keir Starmer's latest bid to avoid a Labour leadership contest is offering